And we are live. Welcome, everyone, to the Digital Renegade Podcast. I am your host, the Dashing Rogue. I'm here with my frequent sidekick, Artistic Layman.
How do you do, fellow kids?
And I am with my friend, Matt Forney. How are you doing, buddy?
Hey, everyone. I'm doing good.
Well, that's pretty awesome, man. So, have you heard much about this Logos Rising thing that's going on?
Well, I've like I said, I've commented a bit about it, and my perspective was that it could be a good thing, but now the scammers are coming in, which depresses me greatly. Because it's like the one time I want to be positive and not be black-pilled, and not be like depressed over what's going on, and well, there you go again.
Well, what did you understand it to be precisely? May I ask?
I was looking at it from the perspective of people getting interested in Catholicism and Christianity, ideas about the importance of God and the natural order. It's a stepping stone away from Wignat race idolatry, which has dominated the dissident right for the past few years.
Okay. Would you agree that a majority of people within the movement agree with your position on that?
I don't know. I haven't, like I said, that this is my service reading of the Logos Rising thing. Seeing all that stuff around, and also like my surface reading of E. Michael Jones' works. Who's the one? He's the one who originated the whole thing. Yeah, that comes from his writing.
All right. Well, Luke. Actually, this is for Luke and Forney, by the way. What is your understanding of the Logos? What does it mean?
Well, the Logos is always I've always understood to be like a reference and title to God, because Logos is Greek for the Word, and Jesus is referred to as the Word, especially in John 1, and that's what Logos has been. And so this Logos Rising, I mean, I only just heard about because it was referenced in Beckloff's show and referenced on Twitter, and I was kind of wondering what it was referring to, but it seemed to be because I actually, and I don't know if we want to bring this point up, but Beckloff took kind of a certain connotation to it because only quote unquote Spurgeon important people are ready to bring it up all over again. And I decided to make the reference that, I know something weird about this Logos Rising. It's amazing. It's a way of referencing Christ without actually mentioning Christ, while distracting from Christ. And it was just kind of strange, especially when you go to these Logos Rising shop, which hopefully I'll get this picture of. And it's just, at the kind of this is the point of what Christianity is all about. Yeah,
it's the personal Jesus, right?
Well, not even a personal Jesus. It's like an abstract description of Jesus, because Logos Rising, it basically is this notion of having social consciousness and having we're raising up to a greater society, which has not directly connected to Jesus.
Okay. Is that fair? Is that a fair assessment, you think, of what this movement is becoming, Matt?
Well, I see it basically as just becoming an excuse for people to scam and grift. Like that's my main service reading of it. Like my main depression is when I see like idiots from the 21 convention putting logos in their names. If your entire shtick is selling e-courses, sells, and now you're going to claim to be a part of the Logos, it's done. You don't know the meaning of the term.
All right. Well, before we begin to continue, I wanted to say those are very good terms for what Logos is and what Logos can be. However, I want people to understand that there's a difference between rhetoric and dialectic. Now, rhetoric, from what I understand, is terms that are undefined. Information just comes at you so quickly that oftentimes it is either undefined or it is assumed that you are. Let's see. It is either assumed that you know what you're talking about, or the viewer understands. For example, we all know what hard work is, even though we never really get told what hard work is. We all know what it means to be good. We have a general idea of what it means to be good. We have a general idea of what Logos is. But at the same time, if we're told that feminists want to serve man, that could mean many different things. It can mean that, you could have, housewives and, 1950s Norman Rockwell. But at the same time, you could also have well, you could have them serve men on a silver platter. You gotta be careful with the rhetoric. You have to define your terminology. And this is what the difference between rhetoric and dialectic. Some people can be persuaded via rhetoric alone, but some people have to, be persuaded via dialectic, which is dialectic comes from the term through. You're going through knowledge. That's like diagnosis, right? So what we're trying to do is trying to show you the path of how we got to where we are at. Now, Luke is very interested. He brought up the fact that there are a lot of these the Catholics supposedly, and again, the Catholics are notorious for this. I'm not using the term logos anymore. I'm going to be using Jesus whenever I talk about logos, simply because there are just too many ideological pitfalls you could come to when it comes to Catholicism, and like so many different prerequisites and pre-perceived notions that need to be added on for you to understand why Jesus is the way, the truth, and the light. He's also the Word, So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you. Have you seen the Black Pilled video?
Which one? What do you mean?
Black Pilled video when propaganda is logos.
Oh, no, I haven't.
Which is a very easy use of title when considering the topic we're talking about.
Yes. You've seen that video, Luke.
I have. I noticed that the word logos only comes once.
Yeah. Yes. What are your thoughts on it, may I ask?
Well, I mean, aside from the fact that because he does have Black Pill has a point that propaganda is useful because we have a negative connotation of propaganda, which is just it's meant to like brainwash or control people, but to propagandize is to propagate, it's to put forth ideas and direct people into particular directions, and of course, because people have this negative connotation, people think it only goes one way. The thing is, we all need this information to go either which way, and he was making the point that people in the masses need some sort of like general direction or general focus or general information to go with. And he put an interesting point, like referencing these old 60s videos of government videos just general public service announcements, like public videos telling people about the dangers, like stranger danger or some like a sexual assault victim. But that because I don't see what logos has to do with it though, because they're trying to incorporate logos as this term for greater society, which is kind of defeating the purpose of what we want to specifically talk about logos.
So what have you ever heard of the term? Have you ever heard of the term public relations?
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, where have you heard that term, and what relationship do you have with that term?
Public relations. That's the art of communicating, fashioning the image you want to have in the eyes of the public. We usually use it in the context of like corporations, public relations, selling products, smoothing over scandals. Same thing with government, public relations. Public relations is the art of getting your image out into the public and making the public see you in the way that you want to be seen.
Interesting. And who invented the term public relations, may I ask?
I believe it was Marshall McLuhan.
No. I'm going to send you a link in the chat, Luke. Are you familiar with a man by the name of Edward Bernays?
Oh, Edward Bernays. Yeah, I know him.
Okay. So this is something that I think we've gone enough with the definitions and the terminology here when it comes to the certain issues of public relations and how we would use rhetoric in this case, because we're not using logos, we're using rhetoric. We're not actually using dialectic to show people why something is better. We're just trying to propagate, saying don't do this like a child. I don't think that's the most valuable way of doing things, but I wanted to show you just how damaging this type of crap could be done onto people. Have any of you heard of a man by the name of Alexander Gerovich Dugin?
I know him, yeah.
You know him?
I know him way too well. I don't know him personally, but I know who he is.
Okay. What do you know about him?
Is Russian philosopher, troll, pontificator on geopolitics.
Hmm. Have you read one of his books? Are you familiar with one of these books of his? It's called well, it's in Russian, but again, the translation, roughly speaking, is I've linked into a chat, by the way. Luke, you could take a look at that. We'll get to that guy in a second because this is very important also because you'll see just how badly things are getting. Not yet, Luke. But in this article, it talks about it's called Alexander Dugin's Maps of Meaning. Now, when I was first introduced to Dugin through a man by the name of Freedomain, not Freedomain. What is his name? Freedom Alternative Research and Analysis. Now, this is Alexander Dugin's book in it, and in essence, what it talks, the label of it is called the Dark Logos. Now, in search of the Dark Logos, and I'm going to read it off for you, a little bit of it. The work is something like that of a 0 to 22 volume Nomadita book series. I will probably have something to say about the latter in the later post, but I've completed the first volume and some of the second volume, but both which lay the metaphysical principles of that project. For now, I thought that I'd post a description of In Search of Dark Logos as it appears in English on page 506 of the book, together with the keywords to give you a taste of what lies within the cover. This philosopher, this trad Orthodox Christian philosopher, starts talking about, he starts talking about, as described in this article, the author tries to gauge the cognitive structures that predetermine the theological, philosophical, and psychological patterns of the deep levels of the human consciousness. He analyzes the basic mechanisms of language and its thematic core and the original types of semantic opposition that are discovered afterwards in complex theological and philosophical and political systems. The author seeks to explore and eventually reconstruct the deepest levels of the human being and its subconscious, preconscious, and conscious horizons, surveilling for the reason. For that reason, different kinds of religions, ancient modern philosophies and political theories, utopias, and eschatologies varying from Plato, Neoplatonism, Christianity, Islamic, and Jewish theologies up to Schilling, Hegel, Heidegger, yada, 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 yada. Again, going down into the article will be in the description when this is all over with. Following Nietzsche, the author calls for the philosophy of Dionysus, or the other logos, that time the dark one, that this time that the dark one is called dark because of the comparison between common for Western civilization, rational and solar type of Apollonian logos, which is one that can be perceived in something chaotic, ambiguous, and not sufficiently transparent. The author asserts that in order to correctly understand non-Western cultures, including the Russian one, he doesn't see Russia as a Western culture, at least in this particular critique. We need to use this type of logos, which contrasts with the exclusive way of thinking, characteristics of European mentality, and full apparent contradictions and suspended logical operations.
Okay, now can you please repeat that in English?
Oh, absolutely. Well, if it sounds odd, that's because it's meant to be odd. Now, this guy is not who he says he is. He is not, by any stretch of the means, well, let's just say he's not a good actor. Now, I'm going to link this again to you in the chat. Luke, you may play this clip. It's a YouTube video. You may play it. Don't worry about the copyright. We should be fine.
Let's see. So what is this?
Just play it.
The The problem is that it's not perceived. If you go more in depth, that there is a very important ideologies that is very influential for the Putin regime. His name is Alexander Dugin. Alexander Dugin has given an interview for a Polish Catholic magazine, Fronda, in 19, I think, yeah, 80. Yes, that is far long ago, 97. Grzegorz Górny. Yes, yes. It was right before the election of Putin, and then the Polish journalist went back to Dugin to ask him about Putin, and Dugin said in that interview it was, unfortunately it does not exist in English, but it's very, very important, and it's. I think it's thanks to the fact that the Polish journalist was able to provoke him. Dugin said many things that he usually does not say for the Western press. And he said there that you shouldn't take it personally, he says to Grzegorz Górny, but you have to understand that we, Russia and Germany, don't have any interest for a free Ukraine, independent Ukraine and independent Poland between our countries. So we are going to do our best in order to remove these obstacles from our way, because we need to join. Another thing that he said, and is very important, is that we need to destroy the West, both with the left and with the right. So we have to use the new left and the new right. These are Dugin's words. He said that very precisely. And then there was another question that Grzegorz Górny made. He said, he asked Dugin, is there anything in Polish Catholicism that you think is worth being supported? And Dugin said no, but in Poland I would support any Masonic, any progressive, Catholic progressive movement in order to undermine Polish Catholic Church. So the Poles have just one choice. Either they consider themselves Slavic and come with us and give up their Catholicism, or they don't give up their Catholicism and they are going to be destroyed. That's what Dugin really says. For the people here who don't know who Dugin is, there is one more thing very important that needs to be said, that in 2002, the Russian Orthodox Church has issued a document condemning his doctrine. So in 2002, Dugin was described by this document. There is a magazine about sects. It's meant to warn people against occultist groups and sects that are dangerous. And there was this document dedicated to Dugin in 2002, where Dugin is described as satanic. And that there are quotes. It's a very serious document, very well done by theologians. And they quote works of Dugin in which he describes himself as admirer, as a disciple of Aleister Crowley. On the other hand, he is also a disciple of Renegade, which is a group of some kind of Gnostic or occultist Islamic tendency. Dugin is very close to Freemasonry, and he is apologetic of even of Nazism. So he wants to join the three things. The third Rome, which is Moscow Orthodox, but in the sense that Dugin understands by Orthodoxy. Third Rome, Third Reich, and Third International. So he wants to take everything that is good. I mean, good for him means destructive for us, from both Bolshevism and Nazism. This is really very dangerous, and it was described exactly as I'm telling you in this document. It's not possible to find it in English. It's in Russian online, and it's in Portuguese. I first found it in a Brazilian website.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chile. We're running late.
So that a lot of that crap, like, again, you're gonna realize this guy is not, he's not a Satanist. Again, Crowley was not a Satanist. He, however, it should be noted, he was very much a man of the left, a spiritual left, more precisely. He was not a man who would be considered traditional, as Dugin would oftentimes consider himself to be a traditional Orthodox, how should you say it, Christian. He is not. Now, again, I sent you a couple links prior to this. Luke, I've sent you a bunch of links, to be fucking quite honest with you. Let's see if I can find.
So where should we narrow it down to?
Well, let's first tackle a few of this stuff. Did you see the clip of him? Let's see. To back the claim that he actually is a follower of Crowley, or a acolyte of Crowley, play this. Play this clip I just sent you.
Let's see.
And if you have those clips of people who he hangs out with, that would be good to play as well in the background while this little clip is playing. Start from the beginning, please.
Я прошу почтить память умершего Алистера Кроули минуты молчания. Если есть в зале какие-нибудь зажигалки и спички, вы можете зажечь и минуту помолчать.
О мой Бог! Един Твой исток, един Твой дух, едино Твое изменение. Позволь мне воспреть Твои совершенства перед людьми. В образе шестиконечной звезды, сверкающей сквозь глупые своды, позволь мне объявить о Твоих совершенствах.
Matt,
Явился мне как очень старый Бог, достопочтимый Бог, господин...
Yeah, I'm not too shocked at this.
Yeah, well, just keep playing it a little bit faster. We don't need to. It's all in Russian. Who gives a fuck? Or French or some fucking crap language. Keep playing.
Времени с острым серпом. Ты явился мне как радостный и довольный Бог, исполненный могущества, король, Отец, в самом рассвете сил, с жезлом вселенной, коронованной короной духа. Ты явился мне с мечом и копьем, воинственный Бог в зияющей броне, в сопровождении свиты рыцарей. Ты явился мне как юный и сияющий Бог, Бог музыки и красоты, как юный Бог во всей своей силе, играющий на лире. Ты явился мне как белая пена, как час и тело магической женщины, как богиня экстремальной любви с золотым поясом. Ты явился мне как юный коварный мальчишка с твоей крылатой державой, как змеи, свившимися вокруг жезла. Ты явился мне как охотница посреди своей своры, как чистая девственная богиня, как луна между вековыми дубами. Но ничего из этого меня не обмануло. Я отбросил все эти видения и закричал: «Пойдите прочь!» И все они исчезли. И тут я сплавил вместе пылающую пятиконечную звезду и шестиконечную звезду в тигле своей души. Смотри, вот появилась звезда 418 над всем этим. Но на этот раз ничего из этого меня не обмануло, потому что у короны 12 лучей, и все эти 12 суть одно. А сейчас я увидел противоположные, дурные вещи. Но они не существовали так же, как не существуешь и ты. Я видел две головы на одном туловище, которые постоянно бьются друг с другом, и поэтому все их мысли пребывают в смешении. В них я видел тебя. Я видел убийц мудрости, как черные обезьяны, они бормотали порочные глупости. В них я видел тебя. Я видел агрессивных матерей ада, разрывающих своих детей. О, вы, которые не имеете понимания. Тебя. Я видел безжалостных и полностью лишенных снисхождения существ, раздирающих как гарпии.
I think we got the point, Luke. So again, Christian, right? Totally Christian, follows the logos, understands natural law, but ultimately, he's not Christian. He's not. And, you know, I think a lot of us here in the West, as well as right-minded people everywhere in the world, know that Christianity and Gnosticism, they're not the same thing. And even then, Crowley was not a big fan of Christianity. He actually hated it. He thought it was the worst thing that ever could happen. Now, I sent you a link also, if you could show that picture I just posted in the chat, of Matthew Heimbach, everyone's favorite fat boy, motherfucking Matt Heimbach. Now, what do you know about Matt Heimbach, Matthew?
Too much. I actually do know him in person, or did years ago. He's a very charismatic individual, which is mandatory if you're going to run a cult. Orthodox Christian, but he got excommunicated from his church. Very fat, very trailer trashish. Very into LARPing about turning America into this Orthodox Christian fascist state. Started out with Trad Worker when that collapsed in the Night of the Wrong Wives. He then joined the National Socialist Movement, and no, I'm not joking, he was a literal Nazi for 3 months before they kicked him out for the crime of being a Strasserist, a communist. No, that's literally what they called him. And now he's leading a new group called the Legion of St. Ambrose, which is going around all black in the Deep South during the summer, burning books and throwing holy water on shit and thinking they're going to turn the Tennessee into a Orthodox Christian theocracy.
And do you have any clips of that? Do you have any? Do you have any clips of it? Luke, could you get some of those clips?
I'll grab their YouTube channel.
All right,
Luke doesn't
please,
already have it.
please, because this is going to be a long haul, gentlemen. We are going straight into the heart of the belly of the beast, and we are going to win this subjective. We're gonna do it. And by the way, for those of you who love this content, subscribe for more. We would very much love you to have you on this little idealistic crusade of ours. We're gonna do it. And
Yeah, hit the subscribe button, hit like, give super chats.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, Luke, I just sent you the link to their YouTube channel. So,
All right.
There's plenty of cringe content there you can mine.
The thing that got me about this guy is I don't really give a fuck if he's a pagan. I just wish he would stop lying and trying to subvert Christianity. Like
So because I'm still confused about what this Dugan character is. Is he like a postmodernist philosopher who try to advocate for a future society but will ultimately undermine it?
Well,
he's a Russian supremacist who blames all the world's evils on Atlanticism as represented by the U.S.
Yes. Let me see if I can have it here. Here's a better clip for you. While you're done play that in the background. Here is the best clip I found online of what Duganism is and why we should be concerned about it. Now, if you recall that woman earlier who talked about how Christianity was essentially like this guy is a Satanist, he's trying to turn both the left and the right against each other. We're going to get into that in a second. Because a lot of those, I'll send you the link. Here you go. It's in the chat. Take a look at it. While that's playing, you can play it simultaneously if possible. The Legion of St. Ambrose. What the fuck is that?
Yeah, they're that's Heimbach's new group.
Yeah, but before that, be sure to subscribe to The Blaze, Blaze TV.
Yeah, well, sad part is the only person who I've seen in all of the chat, or not in the chat, but in the all dissident right who's called out Dugan has been the Ghost guy, the Ghost, free capitalist radio, as well as Glenn Beck of all people. And Glenn Beck, we just dismissed the son of a bitch, right?
Well, it depends. Like my friend Bryden Proctor hosts the Right to Bryden podcast. He also talks about Duganism a fair bit.
That's interesting. You can play. We're not going to watch the whole thing, but we're going to speed it up a bit.
Where should we start?
Unmute it. Very beginning.
Duganism is to the right what cultural Marxism is to the left, only a lot worse. A lot worse because we've come to witness also the rise of the Duginist left lately, such as the coalition of the radical left, or Syriza, in Greece. Sadly, the establishmentarian right and the establishmentarian left have done very, very little to combat Duganism, partly because they don't know what it is, and partly because they're just too hysterical and thus incapable of understanding what they're really up against. So in this episode, we will try our best to understand what Duganism is, how it works in practice, and why it matters. Let's explore.
You can skip it a little bit. There you go.
Hello everyone, and welcome to another installment of Freedom Alternative Research and Analysis. Well, this is probably the most complicated video so far because the whole thing is just too complex and fringe-worthy. And cringe-worthy, but fringe-worthy in particular. Sadly, Duganism is less and less fringe, not because Duganism is correct or a fair alternative to the failures of liberalism, but because Duganism is vague enough to attract disgruntled totalitarians of every stripe. Add to that the never-ending chain of stupidity of mainstream politicians like François Hollande, Angela Merkel, Federica Mogherini, Stefan Löfven, and others like that, and it's getting increasingly easier to see why Duganism is taking roots once you understand what Duganism is, especially once you also take into account the inherent anti-Americanism that is widely practiced in all too many intellectual circles in Europe. The beauty of Duganism and its inherently chameleonic nature, and I mean it when I say the beauty, because whilst I utterly loathe Duganism and I loathe the fact that it even has any type of influence, I do have to admire the simple yet highly efficient agitprop conducted by its followers.
Let's pause it.
We'll get into the minutiae of
Agitprop, for those of you who don't know, is essentially it's a propaganda tactic used mostly created by these how should you say it? the Soviet Union, and what it was essentially designed to do is designed to incite class struggle where there is no class struggle.
Hence the name agitprop. It's a combination of agitation and propaganda.
So, for example, we talk about trad wives versus trad pots. That could very well be used as an agitprop to cause divide and conquer, or white nationalists versus, let's say, the pan-Africanists, as we'll slowly see as we go forward. Pause it. Okay, I'll keep going.
Things in the following minutes, or maybe the following hour, because this video might actually get very long. So, first things first, let's deal with the name. Now, Duginism, the name is more or less informal and comes from the ideology's founder, Alexander Gilievich Dugin, professor of political science at the Moscow State University and the de facto ideologue of the Kremlin in the last 5 or 6 years, depending on which source do you trust. Now, Dugin wrote roughly 3 dozens of books and hundreds, if not thousands, of articles, so the bibliography is quite burdensome. Now, I read 3 of the books and maybe 100 or so of his articles. By the way, he also makes videos on YouTube, and his videos are a lot more interesting if you speak Russian, because then you have the chance of watching his videos in Russian and then those in English. And such a marathon actually provides a very insightful experience into how chameleonic this guy's ideology actually is, and also explains quite a lot on why he has so many useful idiots for his ideological views.
Pause
in
it.
short, what he says in English
Wait. Continue real quick.
is not what he says in Russian, and same goes with Duginist-leaning publications. For instance, the same publication can publish entirely different positions on the exact same story, depending on the language of reporting.
Pause it. Good boy. Oh, that's a little... besides looking a little bit high, by the way, go subscribe to him. Very good YouTube channel. I would consider his content very useful when it comes to like knowing what's going on in the, I would say, the eastern part of the world. Or Eastern Europe, I should say. I bring this up only because if I believe this is from InfoWars. Now, again, InfoWars, right? Play the clip. Play that clip.
InfoWars, you say?
Yes. Yes. Now, I don't know about you, but when I think of Alex Jones, I think he'd be against these type of people, highly against these type of people.
Yes, exactly. And what is important, I have got information that Russian oligarchs, they have a kind of supported financially Hillary. So that was completely opposite to the thing the globalists pretend. Russia, in material world, economically, financially... You are still infested by the same globalists we are. Yes, exactly. We have as well Russian...
Just remember, Crowleyist, guy's an occultist. Yet Jones is talking to this guy, like, because he's supposed to be a trad Catholic, right? I mean, I think I sent you the clip also of Pettibone, and I believe her name, Lauren Southern. They were interviewing this guy as well. They don't know about his occult ties. They don't know about this guy, putting on one face and then putting on another. They don't see that. But hey, we're all about the logos. We're all about saving the West. We're all right wing. We're all trad. You see the difference between dialectic and rhetoric yet, ladies and gentlemen? Do you see how this shit just spews out and people just eat it up like they're fucking some sort of, it really honestly is
like
sad.
It's nectar from the gods.
Yeah, exactly. People are so fucking desperate to get these people to follow some of these people that they will be led to their slaughter. And he's playing both left and the fucking right. Now, go back to the original video, may I ask, with Freedom Alternative?
Yeah. Where'd you go?
Don't worry. We're going to get to it, guys. But yeah, give me one fucking second. It's around here. We'll get to it. Just hang on, ladies and gentlemen. We're gonna get to it. I wanted to do this video for some time now. No, not that one.
Not that one. No.
I'll relink it if I have to. 1 second.
When my text startup needed
the influence.
Gotta get that Dugan shit down. Fucking influence. Stop it. And play.
For his ideological views. In short, what he says in English is not what he says in Russian, and same goes with Duginist-leaning publications. For instance, the same publication can publish entirely different positions in story depending on the language of reporting. And it works. because most people don't speak more than 1 or 2 languages, and the research for such things is costly.
Well,
Anyway,
I'm autistic, so I could basically sit down and do this all myself. And you know, CIA, NSA, whatever you guys out there, I'm always looking for a new job position. Just saying. Go ahead.
In understanding this ideology, which Dugin himself refuses to call Duginism, but rather prefers terms like Eurasianism or continentalism. So the key works in understanding Duginism or Eurasianism and continentalism, whatever, are these 2 books: Основы геополитики, геополитическое будущее России, or The Foundations of Geopolitics, the Geopolitical Future of Russia, and Четвертая политическая теория, or The Fourth Political Theory. Now, the first book is basically Dugin's argument as to why Russia has the right to invade and dominate most of Europe, and then after he's done explaining that, he proceeds to basically expand on Rules for Radicals by Saul Alinsky and lay out a very detailed plan on how to achieve Russian dominance. Now, mind you, the logic is not to have Russia everywhere, but rather to have as many countries as possible play by the music of Russia. The maximum task of the future is the Finlandization of all of Europe, Dugin states in Основы геополитики. Now, Finlandization is basically the term by which a larger neighboring country de facto dominates the foreign affairs of a smaller country, whilst that country maintains some sort of independence and a national political system. Now, the term originates, as the name suggests, with the politics of Finland, particularly the politics of Finland after World War II, when the Soviet Union did not annex the entirety of Finland, but nevertheless got to keep Finland in a state of limbo, neither in the Western Bloc nor in the Eastern Bloc, and generally defenseless and at the mercy and the whims of the Soviet Union.
I sent you, pause it.
Now, this book.
I sent you another link. Pull it up, please. This is from the same guy, let me ask you this. What started the Yellow Vest movement, Matthew?
The Yellow Vest movement. It was the petrol tax, the gasoline tax proposed by the Macron government. The increase.
Who owns the majority of pipelines within the EU?
That would be Russia.
Yes. So we could argue: is it possible for a scenario to play out in which that Russia would use petro as a means to Finlandize its neighbors, in a sense to hurt them economically and get them to play games according to Russia's worldview or how they want the world to be played out? Is it possible?
Yeah, definite possibility.
Okay. So, well, what if I told you that there was going to be a new pipeline that was opening up within the EU called, I believe it's called Nord
Stream 2.
Yes. And isn't it interesting how almost all the Yellow Vest movement, it originally started in France because they were the ones who were very much against the how should you say it, they were actually suffering from Macron's policies. But then we start seeing Germany show up and start saying, "Oh, we're going against globalism. Oh, we're going against all this other shit." And it just again, do they actually get affected by Macron's decree? Do they get affected by the tax?
To a certain extent.
Okay. All right. What extent do you think it would be?
Well, these always get passed on to the consumers, so.
Right, so it would eventually hurt the consumer. All right. Again, the link I sent you was essentially talking about how Russia was the German secretary denounced sanctions against Russia, and I think it's very interesting, especially if you look at how oil dependent these countries, mostly the Eastern Bloc countries, are dependent on Russian oil. I find it interesting in the sense that I think there may be something going on here, some sort of, any sort of meaningful movement may be being hijacked by the Russians in this particular regard. There is a possibility of that. You can play it.
It is well. LNG terminals in Germany. We think the demand is there. And we always say to our US colleagues, LNG is welcome in Europe. It is welcome in Germany. Mr. Naimski has mentioned the positive impact it has had in Poland. We have had the same in the Baltics, where it has helped to drive prices down, to reduce dependency. But we also say to the US, LNG has to be market-driven. What we don't want, and let me say that also very clearly, is that LNG is helped by US sanctions. We totally reject sanctions against the energy relationship with Russia. Nord Stream 2 was mentioned, again, with false information that it is a single connection. It is not a single connection. It's an additional connection. There is a serious and real demand for additional gas. So I think we really have to stick here to the facts. But let me say, LNG is welcome. Sanctions are rejected. We want to develop our energy relations with Russia the way we think it is necessary, and it is good for Germany. And Russia is not the only source of supply. That is false. Russia is below 40% of Germany's gas supply. We have Norway, we have the Netherlands, but the Netherlands will reduce. Germany's own production will reduce. So there is a definite need for more diversification.
Probably yes, probably not. Thanks. Perhaps another question. We don't have much time more, but one question I think we could afford. Yes.
Dan Fried, no longer with the U.S. administration, so I can be a little more frank. My answer to your question about the added value of 3 Cs is that it brings together the United States, the countries of this region, Germany, and the European Commission in a way that might not be possible, including for my own government, if it weren't for this forum. All right, so that is considerable value added. The purpose then in the energy portion is to do what Piotr Naimski was talking about, which is help support alternatives to reduce Russian gas leverage over Europe. If I can be blunt, that's not the only purpose, but that is one of the purposes. And much progress has been made thanks to the European Union. And as for Miguel Berger, we have different views about Nord Stream. I get that. But as we're approaching the issue... I'm not a
shill for the EU, by the way. I'm not a shill for the EU. I'm not a shill for any of these other groups. But my point I'm trying to get across here is that it's not as simple as Macron good, Merkel bad, or, any of this other crap. It's a hell of a lot more foggy, from what I could gather. I don't know everything, and all I report on is what I fucking see. But be that as it may, again, this looks like it's playing out before our eyes, guys. I do believe that, any nationalist worth his salt should bring this up. If you're a European nationalist, if you're concerned about being, subverted by the fucking, rejecting globalism, you don't want to trade one servant for another. You want to be economically efficient, and you should look into this. You should really look into this type of subversion via, resource subversion. So that being said, continue playing.
As you said, let's remember certain facts. It is not true that sanctions are off limits with respect to Europe's energy relationship with Russia. We've already crossed that line. The United States and Europe together imposed sanctions on Russian energy production. I know because I was the U.S. negotiator and we talked about it. So you know it as well as I do. We've crossed that line. Now, having said that, I'm not a believer in sanctions targeting Nord Stream 2. But we have crossed the line of sanctions on Russian energy after their invasion of Ukraine. And what I would love to see is a way to, we're not going to come to a common position, Miguel, on Nord Stream 2, but I would love to see Germany coming all in the 3 Cs initiative to work on common projects such as those that Piotr Naimski was mentioning, in cooperation with the European Commission. And then we can agree, best case, we agree to disagree on Nord Stream 2. I will continue to hate it. You will continue to defend it, but we will both work, the United States, Germany, the European Commission, Poland can work to mitigate its strategic downsides and whatever they are. So that's my answer to your question, and I put it bluntly and brutally because I can do so, not being in the U.S. government after 40 years.
Thanks. You mentioned or listed everybody except energy community. I think you forgot it. But now I would, if somebody would really like to reply, give a microphone, of course, to distinguished panelists. But otherwise, we are 2.5 minutes beyond the allowed time. And here, I think in this room, big bosses or presidents will have next session. And the interest of audience will increase again. Thanks to my colleagues and distinguished panelists. I think it was interesting. We all learned many things, and we continue like something or not, but I think we understand each other now better. Thanks.
That was quick.
Yeah, that was quick. Thoughts so far, Matt?
Well, this has been kind of a big thing in Europe. The main thing is that the U.S. is pissed off over it because, it's Germany going to Russia to cut the U.S. out of the loop. The Eastern European countries where the existing gas and oil pipelines are angry about it because, if oil's going to be going through Nord Stream 2, that means less in terms of transit fees for Belarus, Ukraine, Poland, etc. And of course, most of these countries are distrustful of Russia, so they don't like anything that increases, Russian power. Germany, of course, is Germany's always taking the most destructive route out of everything. So yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so I'm going to link that video, the Duganist video again. We're going to take a look into further deep into it because it gets deeper, guys. It really, I'm not just being paranoid here. It gets deeper. Keep playing.
Written all the way back in 1997, lays out a very detailed plan of Russian subversion to be developed not just in Europe, but also in the United States, China, the Caucasus area, Japan, and so on and so forth. And some of the objectives of Duginist subversion have already been achieved or may indeed be achieved sooner than many would dare to think. Let me read a few passages from page 367 from the Foundations of Geopolitics by Alexander Dugin. Quote, all levels of geopolitical pressure must be activated simultaneously. It is especially important to introduce geopolitical disorder into internal American activity, encouraging all kinds of separatism and ethnic, social, and racial conflicts, actively supporting all dissident movements, extremist, racist, and sectarian groups, thus destabilizing internal political process in the United States. It would also make sense simultaneously to support isolationist tendencies in American politics. Now, on page 248, the same book, Dugin writes, quote,
America first. We got to take care of our own people first. We can't be fighting the wars everywhere.
Although we are going to be an empire, we should just be alert about it. But yeah, I'm all for America first.
Yeah, exactly. Fuck Russia. Fuck Russia and fuck everybody else. And if you work with us, we're good. Keep going.
Quote, it is important to provoke all forms of instability and separatism within the borders of the United States. It is possible to make use of the political forces of Afro-American racists, close quote. Now, are you scared yet?
Hey. All right, that's actually a good point to stop it right there. Back to that picture I sent you of that African-American man. That African-American man in Dugan? You know who that is?
Who is this?
That is Kemi Saba. He is a Pan-Africanist. He's he's one of these Pan-African Kang type of people. I will send you the.
That means, and specifically clarify, that means he wants Africa for. Like, how does he want to run Africa?
He's a Kang.
Unite Africa under one banner.
Yeah,
anti-colonialism.
Anti-colonialism
on the banner of we was kings and we should rule our own our own. Like he's not.
I assume it's like Pan-Arabism was popular in the mid-century.
Let me get the link for this guy in a second. Give me 1 second. I'll get him. Kemi Saba. Here we go. According to the Wikipedia article, you can post this as well. Kemi Saba, French language version of Egyptian for Black Star, born, I cannot pronounce that because you're fucking from a different country, and I don't know how. He is a Pan-Africanist and political leader. Since April 2013, he is a geopolitical analyst in several West African television stations. He gives lectures about Pan-Africanism in many African universities. He is the initiator of the demonstrator against the CFA Frank, who took place in several French-speaking African countries. In January 2018, he was elected as 2017 African Personality of the African News. For his fight against French neo-colonialism. Now, what you gotta ask yourself: why is some Russian fucker, giving, brushing shoulders with a fucking with a Kang? Why is he doing that? Like, what is his goal? Well, if you also know that one of the people who translated the book for this guy, for Dugan was Nina Bisantina. Do you know who Nina Bisantina is?
She's Richard Spencer's soon-to-be ex-wife.
Yeah. So now we have a connection between Alexander Georgevich Dugin, a Pan-Africanist, a white nationalist. Okay, we have a white nationalist as well, or at least a white nationalist woman. And then at the same time, if you look online, it's not that hard to find Dugin with what the hell is his name? Matt Heimbach.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you have Dugin with David Duke. So when I hear stories, again, this is from Tim Pool. I'll let you play this clip.
Let's see.
YouTube. This is from Tim Pool.
Election, I would say it goes beyond the elections. I believe they're meddling in our culture and society. Now, to what degree, that's a good question. How effective, it's another good question. But I think it's fair to point out, in all likelihood, it's true. Whatever your political, left, right, whatever, it's likely that Russia is doing this. Why? Because we literally do the same thing in the US, and so do many other countries. What's interesting, however, is that the culture war may have been exacerbated by Russians trying to make people fight each other. The story from NBC News, Russian documents reveal desire to sow racial discord and violence in the US. Revelations come as US intel agencies have warned of probable Russian meddling in the 2020 election. Of course. But I'll say this, full stop, NBC. When are you going to call out Al Jazeera? They're mad at Russians for making counter rallies of promoting Black Lives Matter, as well as, pro-Trump stuff and Blue Lives Matter. But no one ever calls out Al Jazeera, which is funded very heavily by the Qatari government and produces the exact same content. The story from NBC reads, Russians who were linked to interference in the 2016 U.S. election discussed ambitious plans to stoke unrest and even violence inside the U.S. as recently as 2018, according to documents reviewed by NBC News. The communications between associates of Yevgeny Prigozhin, a Kremlin-linked oligarch indicted by Special Counsel Robert Mueller for previous influence operations against the U.S., laid out a new plot to manipulate and radicalize African Americans. That's what we've known. And so it's kind of scary to me when you see people who exploit this and make a living off it. People like Sean King, for instance, who rally and get behind Black Lives Matter when they're being radicalized by Russia to create racial tensions in this country. I think it's working. And I think there's a profit motive behind it. Now, before we move any further, go to timcast.com/donate if you would like to support my work. There's a monthly donation option, crypto option, physical 16 election. The documents were obtained through the Dossier Center, a London-based investigative project funded by Russian opposition figure Mikhail Khodorkovsky. NBC News has not independently verified the materials, but forensic analysis by the Dossier Center appeared to substantiate the communications. We also have many stories corroborating this information that we've heard time and time again, that the Russians were promoting Black Lives Matter, sharing police brutality content because they want people in America to fight each other. One document said that President Donald Trump's election had deepened conflicts in American society and suggested that if successful, the Influence Project would undermine the country's territorial integrity and military and economic potential. The revelations come as U.S. intelligence agencies have warned of probable Russian meddling in the 2020 election. The documents contain proposals for several ways to further exacerbate racial discord in the future, including a suggestion to recruit African Americans and transport them to camps in Africa for combat prep and training in sabotage. What? This is NBC reporting this? Those recruits would then be sent back to America to foment violence and work to establish a Pan-African state in the South, particularly in South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, and Louisiana. Okay, hold on. I can get behind the idea. There's a bunch of Russians post.
If only you knew how bad things really are, Timothy. If only you really knew how bad things really fucking were. What are your thoughts on this so far? Does anyone see the connections? Matt?
Well, it's a little depressing, but yeah, it's Steve Bannon's on this?
Well, again, this is a leftist look. Again, we have to look into this a bit more. Granted, I don't think, again, there's varying degrees of accountability. I don't think Steve Bannon is smart enough to know that working, again, this is the difference between being a Russian asset or a intelligence asset versus a agent. I do not believe Steve Bannon is a agent. I do believe he is an asset. Now, an asset is somebody who's working with your ideals, with your ideology. So people who, let's say, if you, like, for example, a CIA asset would be an example of a CIA asset would be that woman by the name of she was a feminist back in the day, back in the 60s. Gloria Steinem, Gloria, that chick. There's documents out there of her actually saying, the CIA's ideology was aligned with ours, and our movement was in line with theirs. I personally think that, having economic nationalism, rejecting certain, starting a trade war, encouraging certain things, trying to build a a certain how should you say it, a certain type of a fan base or even a certain political brand that would be favorable for Dugin and for his worldview. I think that he's a useful idiot. I think Bannon at the end of the day is just a useful idiot, but he's being used and pushed in that direction. That is in favor of the Russians, I should say. Now again, continue playing the
other memes that are trying to enrage people to make them fight. But NBC, you really want me to believe that they wanted to send African Americans to Africa for sabotage training and then create a pan-African state in the South? I think that sounds absolutely insane, NBC, but hey, I'll take your word for it. You're verified by NewsGuard, and you're considered establishment mainstream media who seems to know what they're talking about, though they didn't verify the documents. There is no indication that the plan, which is light on details, was ever put into action, but it offers a fresh example of the mindset around Russian efforts to sow discord in the U.S. The blueprint, entitled Development Strategy of a Pan-African State on U.S. Territory, floated the idea of enlisting poor, formerly incarcerated African Americans who have experience in organized crime groups as well as members of radical black movements for participation in civil disobedience actions. The goal was to destabilize the internal situation in the U.S. Frank Figliucci, a former assistant director of counterintelligence at the FBI and an NBC News contributor who reviewed the documents, said they offer a warning to the U.S. I also want to point something out before we go on with this really insane conspiracy theory. There seems to be a lot of former intel people who work for the mainstream media, be it CNN, ABC, NBC. It's really weird. You know, if you follow people like Michael Tracy and Glenn Greenwald, they highlight this kind of issue a lot because these people.
Well, the reason they're formal intel people in these establishment media is because they are assets. Like if you think about like this, if I give you data, Matt, if I give you a bunch of stories to push in your Terror House magazine, or if I give you a bunch of information and what have you, you have your all this data is being aggregated towards you. So, okay, so that's basically that's intel gathering. You're gathering information. You're gathering intel on certain topics. You're gathering in certain, how should you say it, stories that may or may not be useful or may or may not be of note. But if you have that all over the place as these little, I wouldn't even say honeypots, but intel gathering assets, I believe Beck has been accused of one. I'm not sure if I can confirm that or not. But I wouldn't be surprised that a lot of these groups out there are part of this. Oh, here's another one we got. So you notice that little that's the St. Peter's that's not St. Peter's ribbon. That's the Israeli Army veterans show their medals for the Victory Day. Are you familiar with that particular ribbon on Nina Byzantina's how should you say it, on her bag, Matt? On that Luke just pulled up in that article.
No, I'm not familiar with it.
That I believe that to be this symbol. Give me 1 second. I think it's the ribbon of St. Peter. Ribbon of St. Peter. That's St. George's. It's the St. George's. It's the ribbon of St. George. I'm linking it into the article here. It's linked in the. You could play this real quick, or show it. I should say it's a Wikipedia article. Ribbon of St. George, also known as St. George's ribbon, the Georginian ribbon, the Guards ribbon. In Soviet context and terminology, see further, is a Russian military symbol consisting of a black and orange bi-pattern, which with 3 black and two orange stripes. It often appears as a component of many high military decorations awarded by the Russian Empire, the Soviet Union, the current Russian Federation. In 2000, in the early 21st century, the ribbon of St. George has come to be used as an awareness ribbon for commemorating the veterans of the Eastern Front and the Second World War, post-Soviet countries as the Great Patriotic War. It enjoys wide popularity as a brush in Russia as a patriotic symbol, as well as a way to show public support for the Russian government. Again, and now here's what it gets interesting, and this is where we get into the Euromaidan crisis. This was used to show how should you say it? Going up. Go into the part where they start talking about. I believe it's the Russian controversies. Let's look at the controversies. All the way down. All right, it's almost there. But do you guys find this interesting? So subscribe if you find it interesting. And like it if you find it interesting, because I honestly think this is really fucking weird. And
there are so many questions.
So read that off about Ukraine, please, or Matt, if you will. Which
interesting. In April of 2014, the veterans of Kirovorad banned the symbol from Victory Day celebrations or provocations between the activists of different movements. Instead, only Ukrainian state symbols will be used. The next month, Cherkasy urged veterans and supporters not to wear the ribbon or any other party symbols. The Ukrainian government replaced the ribbon with a red and black remembrance poppy like those associated with Remembrance Day in Western Europe in 2014. On May 16, 2017, the St. George ribbon was officially banned in the country, with those who produce or promote the symbol subject to fine or temporary arrest. According to Speaker Andrei Parubi, the symbol had become a symbol of Russia's war and occupation of Ukraine. On May 5th, 2014, the Belarusian Republican Youth Union encouraged activists not to use the ribbon. Officials reported that the decision to not to use the symbol was related to the situation in Ukraine, where the ribbon is used by militants and terrorists. In time for Victory Day 2015, the ribbon's colors were replaced by the red, green, and white from the flag of Belarus. But the president of Belarus, Alexander Lukashenko, arrived on May 7, 2015 in Moscow. The St. George ribbon combined with the flag of Belarus placed on the lapel of his jacket, thus showing his personal positive attitude to the ribbon. Canada. During preparation for the first Victory Day parade in the Canadian city of Winnipeg on May 10, 2014, the Russian embassy distributed its ribbons of St. George to participants. The move was considered controversial in view of the ongoing events in Ukraine, with the Ukrainian-Canadian Congress calling the ribbon a symbol of terrorism. Kazakhstan. Some parties made statements intended to discourage the use of the ribbon in Kazakhstan in 2014 for Victory Day celebrations, suggesting that red of the Red Army and turquoise, the national color of Kazakhstan, should be used instead. However, no official authority issued any comments. Latvia. The government of Latvia proposed a ban on the use of any ribbons of St. George by law in May 2014. Earlier, Latvia imposed a ban on the use of all Soviet symbols at public events. Lithuania. The ban on similar grounds to that in Latvia has also been discussed.
So yeah. So now you have to ask yourself. We know this guy wants to take over Europe. We know he wants to establish the Finlandization of certain Baltic and East European countries. We have pictures of Nina Byzantina, various African groups, certain white supremacists, I should say white supremacists, white nationalist groups, certain, Pan-Africanists out there holding it. So there is something going on. This does look like this is something to be looked at, you know? That being said.
Far too many coincidences happening here.
Yeah, exactly, right? There's way too much shit going down. Now, if we go back to the original, let's say what is his name? Oh, what the fuck is his name? Oh, yeah, Freedom Alternatives Duganist video. We're going to continue through this. We're going to get through this, ladies and gentlemen.
Because there's more, as in a lot more. Page 216 on the construction of the Eurasian Empire. Quote, at the basis of the geopolitical construction of this Eurasian Empire, there must be placed one fundamental principle, the principle of a common enemy, a negation of Atlanticism, a repudiation of the strategic control of the United States, and the rejection of the supremacy of economic liberal market values. This represents the common civilizational basis, the common impulse which will prepare the way for a strong political and strategic union, close quote. So basically, the Eurasian Empire is basically the union of America haters. Now that sounds lovely. Now, this is the man who, in mid-1990s, when he was writing this book, was also the main agitator for an organization called the National Bolshevik Party, an informal fascist organization that managed to get its own members of parliament, no less, in internal Russian politics.
Pause it.
Now, this organization, the National
Nazbol. Where have we heard that before? Wasn't that fucking wasn't that guy who shot up a mosque? Wasn't he considered Nazbol? That guy in New Zealand. The New Zealand shooter. What was his name?
Oh,
Brenton Tarrant.
Yeah. Let me see if I can pull up. Let me see if I can find an article on that. I think I sent it to you, by the way. Again, another. Let's see if I have it here. Where is it? It's right around here.
There he is.
Yeah, Mr. Gas. Now, I say gas for two reasons. One, we know the guy, Mr. Subscribe to PewDiePie over here. and his memes. Like, if we know this guy is a magic user, like how should you say it, like an occultist, and if you looked at all the symbolism and all the use of memes and all that crap that he used, what that essentially was, what he was trying to do is he was trying to get people to memorize him. Now, if you also recall, what did he say that he was originally trying to do? He was trying to incite a race war, right? Like, for all extents and purposes. Is that correct, Matt? Is that a good
I guess. Yeah, it's a fair assessment.
Yeah, it's a fair assessment. Where did he try to do this at? Was it where a bunch of, ethnic Europeans were being, slaughtered, like in Sweden, or certain, certain parts of, Europe where, they're actually, girls getting raped and sexually assaulted by Muslims and fucking Pakis and shit? No, probably not. He wanted to do it in the United States. Why, oh why, would he try to start a race war in the United States? Well, the man was also supposedly part of the National Bolshevik Party. He was a National Bolshevik. He was Nazbol. Yeah. Yeah, the son of a bitch was Nazbol. Now, I don't know much, but I know this. If we continue playing...
How can one man have so much influence on so many different departments?
Because he's a chameleon. He's a fucking chameleon.
Members of parliament, no less, in internal Russian politics. Now, this organization, the National Bolshevik Party, eventually did split along the lines of Putin-loving. So Dugin was on the Putin-loving splinter group, which now no longer uses the name National Bolshevik Party, but rather calls itself the Neo-Eurasian Movement. It's funny because this is a case of ideological subversion that is plainly obvious and honest, yet you are called a conspiracist whenever you talk about it. Anyway, back to Dugin's books. Dugin's Plan for Europe, page 369, quote, "The task of Moscow is to tear Europe away from the control of the United States, to assist European unification, and to strengthen ties with Central Europe under the aegis of the fundamental external axis Moscow-Berlin. Eurasia needs a united, friendly Europe." And in pages 251 to 252, Dugin had already clarified that the goal is a, quote, supranational empire in which ethnic Russians would, quote, occupy a privileged position, close quote. Now, if you think that resembles the Soviet Union, you would, of course, be correct, and Dugin himself is very open about it and admits it one page later at page 253, where he notes that his ethnic model is quite similar with the Soviet Union. And by quite similar, we will be excused if we presume to mean identical, since I have yet to see anything in Dugin's visions of the future that does not lead to gulags and extreme poverty by means of socialism. Now, needless to say, Duginism is inherently anti-capitalist, but that's hardly a surprise for one of the founding members of the National Bolshevik Party, isn't it? Anyway, enough with this book. Let's go to the other book that is relevant to understanding Duginism, Четвертая политическая теория, or the fourth political theory. Now, this book is published in 2012 when Dugin was already an advisor for the Kremlin, and it is 15 years after the overt totalitarianism of mid-1990s. Now, I would dare to say that by the time he started writing the fourth political theory, Dugin himself became more, let's say, intellectually disciplined, and also a lot more aware of the fact that you can't just go to the world and say, "Hello, chaps, I'm here with the Eurasian Empire. Hey there, Germany, we'll give you Kaliningrad back in exchange for your Finlandization. What do you think about that? Oh, and by the way, you can have Estonia as part of your influence as long as you play nice with France." I mean, he must have realized somewhere along these years that selling such radical ideas is a lot more of a complex process, and bluntness is not one of them. Now, in the intro, I compared Duginism with cultural Marxism for the simple reason that it follows the exact same path. It started out as a splinter group of the Bolsheviks and then gradually refining itself to become more subversive and a lot less open about its goals. Now, if you remember, the Frankfurt School outright
Yeah, so again, no wonder they called Heimbach a fucking commie. You know, when he's doing all this like satanic, like, I don't want to say satanic, like this occultist type of shit. Yet at the same time, like, can you like pull up a? I know I'm working really hard this time, Luke, but can you pull up like the trad worker trad workers union symbol, please?
The trad workers or the other one?
The trad worker.
Where are you?
That's around here somewhere.
The traditional cuckoldry party.
Oh, absolutely. Fat boy needs not fat boy. What the hell's his name? Fat Matt needs to get his ass kicked. Honestly, not that I advocate. I disassociate myself from violence.
Oh yes, the gear with the pitchfork.
Not that one. The one that looks more like a star, if you will.
Oh yeah. This. Well, technically it's cut in half. But I think I have it. Where are you?
Don't advocate violence. Instead, get that the meme of Garfield saying you are not immune to getting your ass beat.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, yeah. Not that one. The other one. Let's see if I can find the trad work.
It looks like a tic-tac-toe.
Yeah, give me one.
Oh wait, no, you mean the new one?
Yep, give me one bloody second. It is the trad youth. Trad youth. It's not trad. It's trad youth, not trad. It's not trad workers party. It's trad youth.
Traditionalist Youth Network.
Yes, pull that up.
Traditionalist Youth Network. There you are. There he is. There's Heimbach himself posing it. There he is.
What do you know? Same fucking symbol. Same. So we have a guy who has connections to Dugin. We have guys who is using the same iconography to a certain degree. You have the guy who is connected to him by faith. You have the guy connected to him by, how should you say it? By ideology. He's just as subversive. And let's be honest, he's not right wing. This fat boy is not right wing. He really isn't. I mean, look at him. He looks like he's gonna like I can milk him or something. He's such a fat fuck. Anyhow, continue with the free domain.
Used to call its institution the Institute for Marxism, but rather opted for a more vague term of Institute for Social Research. Same goes with Duginism. You see, it's not Duginism, but it's continentalism, which is opposed to Atlanticism, and it's not about creating a Russian empire, but about a united and friendly Europe. See how this goes? Now, as a result of this...
Oh yeah, it's not breaking your civil liberties is the Patriot Act.
Yeah, don't, dude. We gotta save the white race, don't you know? We gotta save it. You gotta have Pan-Africanism. Oh, don't worry. There's not like there are different languages and shit like that. Or the same thing with Europe. I mean, we have to have a united Europe. We have to fight the evil Atlanticists, the globalists, don't you know? Same fucking shit. Go on.
Let's say increased discipline from Dugin, the fourth political theory starts out from a less insane premise, so to speak. So it starts with the introduction called To Be or Not to Be. Now let me read you a bit from it, with a note that I read the book originally in Russian, and this is not my translation. So, from the introduction of the fourth political theory, quote, "For our country," Russia that is, "the fourth political theory has, in addition to everything else, a large practical significance. The majority of Russians suffer integration into the global community dramatically, like a deprivation of their identity. The liberal ideology in the 1990s was almost entirely rejected by the populace. But together with that, it is intuitively understandable that the appeal to the illiberal political ideologies of the 20th century, to communism and fascism in our society, is unlikely, since those very ideologies already proved themselves historically as failures in opposition to liberalism, to say nothing of the moral costs of totalitarianism. Therefore, in order to fill the void, Russia needs a new political idea. Liberalism does not fit, but communism and fascism are unacceptable. Consequently, we need a fourth political theory. And if for someone this is a question of free choice, the realization of political will, which can always be directed both to an assertion and its negation, then for Russia this is a question of life and death, a Hamlet-like question. If Russia selects to be, then this automatically signifies the creation of a fourth political theory. In the opposite case, there remains not to be, and quietly leave the historical arena to dissolve into the global world, neither brought into being nor directed by us."
Pause it. But you already exist. You guys chose socialism. Now you have to suffer the natural consequences. Why is it so hard for you to get? Oh, we didn't suffer that. We didn't suffer that. It's the fucking, it's whatever the hell it's the globalists, it's the Jews, it's the Jesuits, it's the fucking Masons. We can't just acknowledge that we got a bum deal because our ancestors, chose a shitty ideology. Now, granted, it's going to, the thing that just pisses me off is that people think that Russia is some sort of fucking, traditional Christian heaven. I mean, even fucking, what's his name? Paul Joseph Watson started playing the same bullshit. Oh, they're kicking ISIS's ass. Oh, there's no abortion. Oh, it's just this wonderful haven. It's not. This guy is a liar. This guy has lied his ass off, and people have bought it. And we can't talk about it anymore. We can't.
Just out of curiosity, does Brother Nathaniel fit into this somehow?
I don't see any evidence for that. I have not seen any. Believe it or not, this guy, Nathaniel, I don't see any evidence. Although I would love to interview him about this. I don't know if Matt, if you can make that fucking happen, but
I don't have any connections to the guy, so.
Well, maybe you can get me in contact with Ramsey Paul. I know you have connections to him. I'd probably love to maybe, have a little bit of conversation and just talk about it. That's it. So go on, play it.
Now, this is a far more sophisticated argument for Russian imperialism than what we have read in the Foundations of Geopolitics. For starters, it proclaims to denounce totalitarianism, while in the 1990s Dugin was an open fan of it, and then frames the issue into an existential one, namely that if Russians don't build an empire fast, they will simply die out as a civilization and as a people. And here I should probably note that Dugin views Russia as a distinct and different civilization from the rest of Europe. Now, I will refrain from criticism for now. I'll leave that for the second and third part of this video. So, further in the introduction, Dugin explains that liberalism is the first political theory, communism is the second political theory, and fascism is the third political theory, and he then launches into a critique of liberalism after swiftly dismissing fascism as having died in its youth, his words, not mine, and communism as having died of decrepitude. Now, mind you, Dugin takes a rather holistic view of ideologies. For instance, he sees Mussolini's fascism as just an offshoot of fascism as a political theory that merely competed with Hitler's National Socialism or Franco's National Syndicalism. The same way he describes Soviet communism as merely one of the branches of communism coexisting with other forms of communism such as North Korean Juche or European social democracy. And he's not wrong in that regard. He also describes liberalism as existing both as a left-wing flavor and a right-wing flavor. His critique of liberalism, however, is what persuades a lot of people to adopt elements of Duginist thinking without even realizing it. Now, that's the part of Duginism that makes it so dangerous and also similar to cultural Marxism, which has become so entrenched that even hardline cultural Marxist activists don't even know where their ideas come from.
Am I the only one who's kind of bothered by the realization that we're all living in the shadow of Marx?
Yeah. Yeah, the shadow of communism, the specter of communism, man.
A man who couldn't hold a job trying to talk to everybody about the classless society.
Yeah, man. It's fucked up, man.
Who led himself and his children to suicide and led into utter misery and poverty. Great.
And, wrote books that killed millions of people. I mean, maybe Dugin, that's one thing Dugin doesn't have yet. No one's died because of his fucking ideology and his Russian fanfic shit. Go ahead, play it.
By these kinds of mind games, Duginism attempts to accomplish basically the same thing. Now, mind you, the term itself, mind games, comes from Dugin's own website called 4pt.su. Now, 4pt for the fourth political theory, and SU from, the Soviet Union. Anyway, before reading from Dugin's Soviet website, let's read some more from the fourth political theory. So, Dugin on liberalism, the fourth political theory, chapter 1, very long quote. Here it goes. The end of liberalism and post-liberalism. It happened that the victory of liberalism, the first political theory, coincided with its end. But this paradox is only apparent. Liberalism initially showed itself forth as an ideology, not as dogmatic as Marxism, but no less philosophical, well-built, and precise. It was ideologically opposed to Marxism and fascism, waging with them not only a technological war for survival, but also defending its right to a monopolistic formation of the way of the future. While other concurrent ideologies were alive, liberalism remained and grew stronger, particularly as an ideology that is a totality of ideas, opinions, and projections peculiar to a historical subject. Each of the three political theories had its own subject. The subject of communism was the class. The subject of fascism was the state, in the Italian fascism of Mussolini, or the race in Hitler's National Socialism. In liberalism, the subject was the individual, freed from all forms of collective identity, from all kinds of attachment, or l'appartenance. Now, here's Dugin acknowledging being influenced by Alain Benoit, a French ideologue who actually admired Antonio Gramsci, that is a cultural Marxist, and Jean Baudrillard, also a cultural Marxist, yet who is for some reason thought to be conservative. Now, are you confused yet? Hold on, there's more, and the more we...
Yes, I am.
That's the whole point. This guy, again, it's like the whole purpose of this is just to say, oh, well, we can do whatever we want. We're going to define, Trotsky as, a globalist, but we're going to say Stalin was a nationalist, which he was. But the difference here was he wasn't using the state as like you did. All right, Matt, do you know the difference between Trotsky and Stalin?
And Trotsky believed in socialism, worldwide revolution, socialism in every country, whereas Stalin wanted to concentrate on building up in the Soviet socialism in one country.
Okay, so one is essentially we want to have global. That's where we get the I guess you could say the dichotomy of imperialism, like ideological imperialism from, let's say, like Stalin wanted to use the Soviet Union as a satellite. With its satellite nations to try to control other groups, versus, let's say, Trotsky, where he said, well, we're going to use the Soviet Union as a springboard to launch other revolutions in other countries and then leave them and let them do what they need to do. Would that be a fair assessment, you think?
Yeah.
All right, continue playing.
This right away.
We progress, the more intentional the confusion gets. Anyway, confusion is the main tactic of Duginism. So back to the book. Here. Quote, while the ideological fight had formal antagonists, entire narodi being the Russian word for peoples, and societies, at least theoretically, could select which subject to address themselves to. So the class-based, the racial, statist, or the individual. The victory of liberalism answered that question. The normative subject at the limits of all humanity became the individual. And soon appears the phenomenon of globalization, the model of a post-industrial society, the beginning of the epoch of post-modernity. From now on, the individual subject is no more the result of a choice, but some kind of compulsory given. A man is freed from attachments. The ideology of human rights becomes standard, at least in theory, and in fact compulsory. Mankind, composed of individuals, is naturally drawn to universalism, becomes global and integrated. Thus is born the project of world government and world rule, or globalism. The new level of technological development...
Okay, that's kind of a stretch there, though.
Well, again, we're talking about a guy who's a fucking bum off the streets of Moscow. Just because you give him a magical piece of paper doesn't make him any smarter.
And this actually reminds me of a clip about postmodernism right here, if I can play it.
To ask what this means is to miss the point. The sentence beats readers into submission and instructs them that they are in the presence of a great and deep mind. Actual communication has nothing to do with it.
Oh, walrus boy! If only you knew what dangers lurk for you. Go ahead, play.
Development allows people to reach independence from the class structures of industrial societies, namely post-industrialism. The values of rationalism, science, and positivism are recognized as disguised form of totalitarian repressive strategies, i.e. big narratives, and are thus exposed to criticism with a parallel glorification of complete freedom and independence of individual from any restraining factors, for that matter from reason, morality, identities, social, ethnic, or even gender, discipline, and so on and so forth. Basically, postmodernism. At this stage, liberalism stops being the first political theory, but becomes the only political practice. The end of history comes, politics is replaced by economics, by the global market, governments and nations are drawn into the melting pot of world globalization. Having won, liberalism disappears, transforming into something entirely different, post-liberalism. It no longer has a political dimension. It is not a matter of free choice, but becomes a peculiar kind of fate, from which comes the thesis of post-industrial society, the economics of fate.
Yep, we are living in the spirit of Marx. Over and over again, it's always Marx.
So, well, Marx won't die because Marx, what doesn't kill it only makes it more retarded.
Hulu subscription, everybody, for the Veronica Mars season 4. What is Veronica Mars?
Veronica Mars. Oh God, that's an old show. What the fuck? It's still on? Did it get like relaunched or something? I can't honestly remember. It's a detective show.
Oh, okay.
I sent you some more pictures and shit that I thought would be funny.
Now, of course, the only problem is that this is not a critique of liberalism. Dugin is, of course, correct when he criticizes the excesses of modernity, but he misattributes this criticism to liberalism. There's nothing in the liberal tradition preventing people from associating. Actually, quite the opposite. Classical liberalism, which Dugin thinks it's the first political theory and the one that won the war for modernity. Well, classical liberalism actually absolutely insists on the natural right to free association. It is the leftist tradition that opposes free association, or at the very least seeks to include caveats to that right. A classical liberal thinks that on your own property, as well as on legitimately operated property, one is free to associate with whomever one wants. A leftist, however, thinks that one is free to associate with whomever one wants, provided that one chooses to include everyone as long as one is white. So a white students' union is perfectly legitimate in a classical liberal framework, whereas in a leftist framework, such thing is verboten. As we will see...
That sounds kind of familiar.
What now? What sounds?
The white student union. That sounds familiar.
It happened before. Yeah, fucking retards.
Throughout this video, Dugin does this multiple times. He presents a valid criticism of something and then lays the blame on America, on liberalism, on capitalism, or on modernity in general, and he does that regardless of whether that is indeed the case or not. And as he laid out in his book, The Foundations of Geopolitics, he's doing it intentionally, following the credo that the United States and what it stands for must be the scapegoat. In fact, it would be mistaken to assume that Dugin is simply committing an honest mistake. Dugin may have a highly dangerous and apocalyptic ideology, but he is not stupid. Dismissing him and his ideas as just a lunatic fringe is what got us into this mess to begin with. He is not stupid. He knows what he's doing, and he knows it full well.
I think he's pretty fucking retarded. I'm sorry. Again, when all we need is somebody like 4chan or 8chan to go into this guy and just level into the son of a bitch. And I think we could probably make him have a heart attack or die of fucking alcohol poisoning.
I'll get Mr. Medicare to make a video series on him.
Yeah, I mean, the guy's a fucking retard. Like, this guy's fucking retarded. Like, come on, man. You gotta try a little harder. You don't even type in shit. I just type in your name in Google with Russian translations, and you translate your game from Russian to English or English to Russian, and then I just find a whole bunch of shit on you. That's the national from the National Bolshevik Party website. What is that symbol right there, Mr. Forney?
That's the black sun, the sun in red.
Where do you know of this symbol from?
It's found in both Crowleyist philosophy, the philosophy of Crowley, but it was popularized by the Nazis. It can be found on the floor of Wurzburg Castle, which was one of the retreats of Heinrich Himmler. And it's popularly used as a neo-Nazi symbol. Okay.
Luke, I sent you another picture of that woman before. I believe it's the one that says Reconquista. May you place that? Post that up, please.
Conquista, you mean? Where are you?
Here
it is. There's the sun on the floor.
Yeah, the sun on the floor, where it belongs. By the way, it belongs on the floor. It doesn't belong in the sky. It belongs in the fucking floor, so everyone can walk all over and disrespect it. But
it's the black sun, so.
Well, yeah, fucking stop that. Well, no wonder it's so dirty on the floor. No wonder it's blacked. Yeah, my black sun. Fuck. Yeah.
It's kind of lost in all the links. Could you send it to me again?
Oh God. Yeah, I'm gonna have to. I'll find them if I can. Give me one second.
Which one is this one?
It's the one I believe of the golden one. I believe you know who the golden one is.
Golden one.
Mr. I want to LARP as a pagan or some shit.
Oh yeah, the golden. Oh yeah, how's he doing these days?
That muscular, like blonde Swedish dude.
The guy who sounds like he's constantly trying to solve quadratic equations in his head. He does. I'm not kidding. It's the accent, man. He sounds like he's constantly trying to keep his mental game as much as he has his physical game. If you listen to him really closely. Now, granted,
he is actually a mathematician by trade. So
really,
yeah, he's a math
degree. Bad fucking ass. That's awesome.
Yeah, he's not a dumb guy. He's a pretty smart guy. I used to subscribe to his channel, but I kind of got annoyed with his defensive trash.
Well,
the dude has the goods on physical fitness and whatnot.
Oh, that's good. Maybe I might have him on. Dashing Rogue can meet a barbarian class. I don't know if he'll take that lightly or nicely, but be that as it may. I sent you the link before. See if I can fucking connect it. Where the fuck is it? I have it right here.
Unfortunately, it blurs with the other ones. I'm not sure where.
It's the one with. Reconquista. It's right below. Let's see if I can get it for you. Save the downloads. Save as. Give me 1 second. I will re-upload it for you. Once. Yeah, here we go. That one. It's uploaded to you on Skype.
Oh yeah. Oh, there he is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and this woman. What is this woman all about?
Well, again, there is a connection to Crowleyism. There is a connection to the Black Sun. Who is that man over there, right on to the left of what's his name, the golden one?
That is Grinder Greg Johnson.
No.
Yes, it is.
Now, I don't know much, but what is Grinder? Why do we call him Grinder Greg?
Because he's gay.
Oh, he's a faggot. So we have a faggot in the movement. God, he looks like he looks like a little kid who wants to fucking who wants to get some sort of like his Red Ryder BB gun. Look at that shit. Oh, he's like a little.
Oh wow!
Daddy, can I join you in the Marlon Rockwell painting? It's amazing. Oh my god! But no, seriously, the guy. What else do you know about him, Matt?
He's a like I said, he's a homosexual who regards homophobia as Jewish. Subversive individual who's always trying to normalize homosexuality among the alt-right. Legit neo-Nazi. He's big into neo-Nazi esoterica. He publishes the likes of Savitri Devi, the Nazi mysticist, on his website. Let's see. He used to own a pug named Rockwell after George Lincoln Rockwell. Big into Crowley's stuff. Hates Christianity. And got honeypotted by a Swedish Antifa gay guy.
Well, that sounds just wonderful. He sounds like a wonderful guy. I have a link in the description of it will be after this video goes out of the countercurrents. He did countercurrents, right?
Yeah, he runs countercurrents. He founded that.
He's as of 2018 10 remembering Aleister Crowley. So again, this guy. So you said again before that the black sun represented was Crowley's symbol, but also a Satanist symbol.
Nazi symbol.
Nazi symbol, huh? It's quite interesting that we have this guy and that girl, and we have the golden one who I've seen before with the black sun iconography. But I wanted to share that because I wanted to share this as well with.
The left was right all along. There are neo-Nazis in this country, just not in the way they thought.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And the sad part is if we expose them, if we show the world what the fuck they're all about, I think that they wouldn't believe us, and that's what's so fucked up about it. It really
they can only think in terms of Republican and Democrat. Really, they can't think in greater terms of outside political party.
So that woman, his name is Alina Semeniaka. I'm sending you another link.
And what is she all about?
What do you know about her, Matt?
Alina Semeniaka?
Yes.
I think she's she's affiliated with Azov, if I recall correctly.
They're a Satanist.
Yeah.
Now I don't know about you, but she looks way better in that in the little mini skirt than she does in the BDSM outfit. Like she's gonna be taken by some fucking bull.
Oh, but it gets wetter, folks.
Oh yeah. I mean, again, total trad Christian. Trad again. Rhetoric. What is trad? The Muslims are trad. The fucking what the hell you call it? The Crowleyists, they're not trad. They can't be trad because do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. I do not have an idea on that woman or that man in the prior thing. Look at him. She's getting the white meat. She's eating the white meat. Look at her. I kind of want to just text her right now. I know, right? I mean, that shit's got to be at least been out for a couple days. I mean, I don't know about you, but yeah, it's fucked, isn't it?
They look so civilized and enlightened.
I know they're so progressive. I mean, you talk about big brain nibbas. These guys are the biggest brain nibbas out there. I mean, holy shit! You got to actively try to be this fucking spurgish. Anyhow, continue playing.
Where are we? Oh yeah. Audio off. Get the audio back on.
That Dugin knows what he's doing is the 13th chapter of the book called Gender in the Fourth Political Theory. Now, there are a few reasons for which I insist to read from this chapter. It basically reads like a Tumblr post and should thus be mandatory reading for all those real men who troll various places praising Putin and implicitly Dugin. So, chapter 13, the Fourth Political Theory, pages 107 and 108. Longish quote, here goes. How does gender change under the conditions of postmodernity? The postmodern represents a combination of all three political theories. On the one hand, this is an accomplished modernity which has reached its logical end as hypermodern or ultramodern. Thus, all three political theories project onto postmodernity their own gender archetypes, which represented the limits of their own structures. These limits are expressed through an institutionalization of gender in postmodernity. What is the postmodern gender? It is a maximization of the liberal man, the archetype of which applies to all of its antitheses: the stupid, the poor, the non-white, the little, and so forth. It is also the gender of globalization, when the properties of a certain type are extended as social standards onto all other types as universalism. Hence the idea that the proletarians are only the bourgeoisie who have not grown rich yet. Blacks are unmodernized whites, and women are not yet fully liberated men. That is, we see that this all-consuming archetype becomes meaningless. The re-extension of existing gender models can lead to the explosion of the hypermodern like a rotting fungus, and its gender archetypes will fail. Now we are in this moment of a postmodern re-extension and the final breaking of gender. The stages of this break are feminism, homosexuality, sex change operations, and transhumanity. In the West, the second political theory had a great influence on the elites, particularly the creative professions, actors, writers, philosophers, etc. And this is the desiring machine incorporating leftist feminism with its ideas of freedom from sex. Donna Haraway is such a feminist, or rather loosely a neo-Marxist and a postmodernist. She argued that while the mature woman may feel an urge to be liberated, liberation in our culture involves definition of the opposite. Therefore, it is necessary to overcome both the man and the woman through becoming a cyborg. According to her, sex can be overcome only by having overcome being human. In a similar vein is Foucault's conception of sexuality, that is, sexuality prior to sex as a neutral dispositive. Sexuality spreading along the surface of the screen, the body without organs. This pansexuality, which is a smooth surface of sexual arousals, remains unclear in terms of from whom it is derived, for what reason, and most importantly, no matter in what orientation or direction. As a whole, in terms of the erosion and destruction of the gender constructions of modernity, Marxist thought introduces the most significant contribution. Elements of fascism in postmodernity are represented by the practice of BDSM. Contemporary fascism contains strong elements of sadomasochism, and perverted fascism is an essential attribute of postmodernism, along with feminism, cyborgs, and a body without organs, and so on. Eventually, we find ourselves in an interesting situation. The predominant gender of modernity is expressed as a re-extension of its original conception, is fast eroding, and in some instances is about to explode, or perhaps has already exploded. We stand on a transition between the hypermodern and the postmodern, and we do not know where the truth and where the reality lies. So in a postmodern construction of gender, there will not be any men. Let us imagine the situation. The archetype of the man falls into pieces which do not constitute parts of the whole anymore, but symbolize only themselves. Conservative forces can stand up for this archetype, demand the return of masculinity, this reasonable, wealthy, white person, but thereby they only try to continue modernity through gender reconstructions. This position seems hopeless, and here again the fourth political theory, in our opinion, goes forward. We suggest taking a step towards gender as a design, despite the notorious representations of and opprobrium that we will cause. By going beyond the limits of gender, which we know, we get to the domain of uncertainty, androgyny, and sex as practiced by the angels. In the same sphere, it is necessary to search for a gender of the fourth political theory, namely by taking risks in looking behind the limits of the collapsed chimera of modernity. We can as yet provide only outlines. We know that it is the gender of design and trajectory, that this gender represents a root reality, that it belongs to l'imaginaire. By extending our investigation, we can raise the question about the gender of the radical self, which is beyond the basic paradigms.
What the heck was all that?
More importantly, what the fuck does this have to do with logos? What does the fuck does this have to do with Christ? What the fuck does this have to do with Christianity? What does this have to do with Orthodox Christianity? What does this have to do with Catholicism? What does this have to do with tradition? What does this have to do with the fucking right? The answer? Absolutely nothing. Only in words does it have to do with the right. Only in name. These people are fucking rhinos. Republican only in name. These people are fucking... they're treasonous. They're fucking pieces of shit. They need to be fucking put down, you know?
Dashing Rogue, I think you should tell us how you really feel.
Disavow.
Again,
they need to be put down morally.
In Minecraft.
Our words.
Well, they need to be called out. They need to be called out. I'm sorry. I disassociate from reality ever so often. It's fun to take breaks every so often, but be that as it may. Anyhow.
And who is this woman right here?
Oh, that's Richard Spencer's new little boy toy. That's
Megan Bobenik.
Yeah.
Oh, she looks lovely.
Oh yeah.
She's a yeah. She got exposed as a hooker a few months ago on the Slet, an escort. And she was another funny incident because Richard Spencer is so stupid that he decided to move in with her in Chicago, and Antifa already tracked down where they live and is posting flyers in their neighbor in the South Loop. So actually, let me send you the tweet, Luke.
Although considering everything that we've gone over, is this like Satanism killing another kind of Satanism?
Oh, I forgot to add in the hilarious detail about this. The Antifa on the flyers about Richard Spencer and Megan Bobenik, on the original flyers, they misidentified her as Faith Goldie.
Well, they kind of all look the same. I mean, they'll have that like meth head look on them, like their former biker mamas. I mean, that's what I've always got from Faith Goldie. But could you?
I think it's hilarious that everyone knows, even the Antifa knows that she fucked Richard Spencer at Charlottesville.
Could you go into that a bit, please?
Yeah, well, I knew about this for a long time because one of Richard Spencer's inner circle, who I'm friends with, told it to me, and he must have told it to other people because Beardson and Sean on the Sweat found out it, and we're spreading it around as well. But basically, Faith Goldie, she was still working at Rebel, and she showed up.
I can't hear you. You bleeped out.
Where he was staying, ostensibly for an interview. Borrowed the hotel room of my friend, and the two of them.
I can't hear you. Can you repeat that?
But here's a hilarious detail.
You bleeped out a bit, man.
Sorry.
You dropped out a bit. Could you repeat that?
Basically, she went to his. Yeah, she went to his hotel in Charlottesville when that was going down, ostensibly to interview him for Rebel Media. And they went to the hotel room of my friend, and they got down and dirty. But here's a hilarious detail. She, when they first started doing it, she licked his face, which was covered in mace because he had just gotten back from the rally. And then she started going down on him.
Well, she does have those dick-sucking lips. I mean, I don't know.
She got mace on his dick.
Ow! Was she trying to hurt him? Like,
no, she was stupid, and she also got it in her mouth. So, like, about 3 minutes later, the two of them were running to the bathroom screaming. Wages of sin, right there.
Fucking ass.
Oh no.
Oh my God. Okay, so but let me ask you this, and you may not know this. This is very personally detailed. Did she swallow?
I don't think my friend knows that detail. I'm gonna say yes. She's got that. Even before she like went independent, like if you watch her Rebel Media views, she always had that kind of naughty Catholic schoolgirl vibe going on.
I've always thought her as the type of gal who you would see on the back of a Harley Davidson with some fucking like 230-pound like fat guy who's just driving around on a motorcycle with her. Like she's some sort of biker mama. Like I could totally see Faith Goldie as a reformed biker mama.
Yeah, she looks like all the Guidos I grew up with, Guidettes. She's definitely got the love of the fake tan, which is why she looks like she's in her 40s.
I despise that. That is so.
The fake tan, the fake lips, the fake boobs.
Ugh. Continue.
Let's see, where were we?
So basically, Alexander Dugin doesn't fundamentally disagree with what we routinely call gender abolitionist feminists. That would be the most cancerous form of genderist ideology that is currently on its way to catching roots in the academe, provided there will still be an academe for them by the time they succeed, but that's a different story. So again, we see Dugin presenting a decent enough description of the status quo and a valid criticism of how things are done, but then intentionally putting the blame somewhere else or simply ignoring it. In this case, he simply ignores and takes the situation as is, and it makes sense for him to do so. I mean, think about it from his perspective, namely the totalitarian perspective. If you want to create an empire with Russia at its center based on Finlandization, now do you want strong families and especially strong men in your buffer territories or in the territories of your enemy? Of course not. You want them to be as weak as possible, so tolerating genderist madness is actually to your advantage. Now, let that sink in for all those alt-right keyboard warriors who claim to oppose degeneracy, but then sing praises to Putin and invite Dugin at their own conferences. All right, one more quote, and then we get to the second part of this video. Told you this is long. Now, while in practice, as we will see in a few minutes, Duginism has sought to infiltrate conservatism, especially the specific sub-brands of European conservatism, who tend to have a more favorable view of the maximal state compared to the fringes of the American conservative movement. Dugin himself explicitly says in his book what critics of Duginism have been trying to explain to naive souls for years now. Duginism is not conservative. Here, chapter 4, The Reversibility of Time, page 38, quote, "The fourth political theory constructs and reconstructs society behind modern axioms. That is why the elements of the different political forms can be used in the fourth political theory without any connection to the time scale. There are no stages and epochs, but only preconcepts and concepts. In this context, theological constructions, antiquity, caste, and other aspects of traditional society are only some of the possible variants, along with socialism, Keynesian theory, free markets, parliamentary democracy, or quote-unquote nationalism. They are simply forms, but they would not be related to an implied topography of objective historical time. There is no such thing. If time is historical, it is cannot objective. Dasein says the same. Dasein is the subject of the fourth political theory. Now, Dasein can be recovered by the refinement of the existential truth derived from the ontological superstructure of society. Dasein is something that institutionalizes time. Durand institutionalizes time by trajectum in his topography. Now, trajectum or Dasein is not a function of time, but time is a function of trajectum or Dasein. This is why time is something that is institutionalized by politics in the context of fourth political theory. Time is a political category. Political time is a preconcept of a political form. The fourth political theory has opened a unique perspective. If we comprehend the principle of the reversibility of time, we are not only able to compose the project of a future society, but we will also be able to compose a whole range of projects of different future societies. Thus, we would be able to suggest some non-linear strategies for a new institutionalization of the world. The fourth political theory is not an invitation to a return to traditional society, i.e., it is not conservatism in the conventional sense. There are many characteristics of our chronological past which are pleasant and many which are not. Similarly, the forms of traditional society can also be distinguished from each other. Finally, the ethnic and sociological matrices and the contexts of different contemporary societies are also different from each other. Therefore, the fourth political theory should not impose anything on anyone. Adherents of the fourth political theory should act step by step. If we simply argue the reversibility of time and Dasein as the subjects of our theory, that would be the first and primary step. We would thus free ourselves to develop the preconcepts. We can define several preconcepts with regards to the reversibility of time and Dasein or trajectum, and therefore we can define several political concepts of time, and each of them can be plugged into the current political project according to the principles of the fourth political theory. Now, translation from all of that longish thingy. Basically, forget about history, we'll do whatever it takes to build Eurasia. If the current political project, as Dugin puts it, requires us to be conservative, we'll be conservative and move forward. But if the current political project requires us to be revolutionary Marxists, then we'll swiftly become revolutionary Marxists for the purpose of that project. That's how it was logically consistent for Dugin and most of his followers for him to personally go and spread his ideas amongst the revolutionary Marxists in Greece. For instance, in 2013, Nikos Koutsias, now Minister of Foreign Affairs in Alexis Tsipras' cabinet, invited Dugin to deliver a lecture titled International Politics and the Eurasianist Vision on the 12th of April at the University of Piraeus, where Koutsias held a post of Professor of Political Theories. In that lecture, Dugin implicitly suggested that rather than leaving the EU and joining the Russia-led Eurasian Union, Greece should remain in the EU to promote the pro-Russian vision of international politics. The same day, Dugin presented his lecture, The Geopolitics of Russia, at the Pantheon University, a lecture hosted by Konstantinos Filis, research director of the Institute of International Relations at the Pantheon University. Now, Dugin, during his visit to Greece, Dugin also met with Syriza's members Dimitris Konstantakopoulos, a man who was a correspondent for the Athens News Agency in Moscow between 1989 and 1999. That would be the period when Dugin was making waves with his national Bolshevik movement. Dugin interviewed Konstantakopoulos, and Konstantakopoulos interviewed him back. Now, Dugin published his interview for his followers, and Konstantakopoulos published his interview for the far-left fans of Syriza. Now, isn't that lovely? Now, soon after this tour in Greece, Alexander Dugin was writing on the internet. Let me read you that quote. In Greece, our partners could eventually be leftists from Syriza, which refuses Atlanticism, liberalism, and the domination of the forces of global finance. As far as I know, Syriza is anti-capitalist, and it is crucial of the global oligarchy that has victimized Greece and Cyprus. The case of Syriza is interesting because of its far-left attitude towards the global system. It is a good sign that such non-conformist forces have appeared on the scene. Dimitris Konstantakopoulos writes excellent articles, and his strategic analysis I find very correct and profound in many cases.
Pause it.
Need a logo? If you're
It's just as well for now. The guy's a fucking leftist. He's a goddamn leftist, and for the life of me, I don't know why everyone just keeps backing this guy. Like, what the fuck, guys? Do your research. This is not hard. I'm a fucking college dropout, and I was able to figure this shit out. I was able to get this guy's number, yet for whatever reason, we just think in rhetoric. We just think in rhetoric. We don't think in dialectic. We don't think in terms of actual, like, any meaningful dialogue or meaningful. Hell, every time I've tried to bring up Russia, Russian subversion, it goes back to the 2016 election. Every fucking time.
That's all we know. That's all we know. That's the only discussion we've had.
Yeah, exactly.
And how fitting it is now that's completely fallen apart that all the mainstream media news outlets are trying to talk about, the other kinds of collusion.
Yeah, and guess what? They damaged the reputation. The one time, the Russians are actually, fucking us. And nobody, the mainstream media discredited. Even Tim Pool, he was like, oh my God, why should I trust you? You know, we are so fucked as a nation at this point. They have a blank check to do whatever the fuck they want. You know, go ahead, play it.
What was that about what Beckloff said about Black Lives Matter? You know, if I want to militarize America, I couldn't have done anything better if I planned it. Black Lives Matter is perfect for this.
Yeah, exactly. And this is why I'll just say it. We need to go talk to the left. We need to go talk to the left. We need to go talk to the right. We need to talk to them about this. Because I'll tell you this, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, you know, and death is coming for us. You know, death is, you know,
death is coming. It's coming.
Death is coming for us from above the wall, and it doesn't give a shit about you. You know, it doesn't care about whether you're, all it cares about is Game of Thrones reference, insert it here, about the White Walkers. Okay, we can have our little, you know, incestuous relationships, and we can have our own little midget porn. But like, honestly, guys, like, just look into this. Okay, do your own research. Look into this. I think it's something worthy of note. Play it.
Now, translation from Dugin talk to normal talk. For the purposes of this political project, namely getting Greece closer to Eurasianism, the fans of the fourth political theory have to be revolutionary Marxists. Are you confused yet? Now get ready for more confusion as we transition to the second part of this video. Now, having a somewhat decent idea of what Duginism is, now we can slowly start analyzing how it works in practice. Now, thankfully, Dugin is less and less secretive on how he intends to broadcast his ideology and subvert other societies. Even though he claims to hate modern communication, he has no problems in using it. The best sources for how Duginism works in practice are his own website, 4pt.su, and also the collective blog, catechon.com. Now, catechon.com is basically Duginism Central Incorporated. It might as well be called Duginism.com, since it is basically a collection of Duginist strategies and Duginist take on current events. Now, it is interesting to note that Catechon is a lot more ideologically consistent than Dugin's own website, 4pt.su, on which Dugin actually publicizes articles that are critical of him, but more on that later. So, Catechon.com is a website led by Dugin himself and the Russian oligarch Konstantin Malofeev, a chap who financed the allegedly local and volunteer troops in Ukraine, an action which got him on the sanctions list imposed on Putin's close people. But Malofeev is a lot more than that. Malofeev is basically Alexander Dugin's bank. He is, if you want, the Church of Russia. Now, just like there are hardly any cultural Marxist groups that are not funded by Church, the same is true with Duginist groups. There are hardly any Duginist groups in Europe that are not funded somehow by Malofeev. And mind you, Duginist groups don't necessarily mean pro-Russian political parties. As Dugin himself laid out in his book, Duginism can and indeed should be disseminated by any means necessary depending on the, you guessed it, current political project. For example, a significant chunk of the pro-life movement, or the anti-abortion movement if you prefer, in my country, in Romania, is actually funded by Malofeev. And the boots-on-the-ground activists don't even know that. And they don't have to. All they have to know is that Russia stands against abortion, a mantra that is routinely believed now in so many conservative circles, in spite of the fact that it's outright false. Now, there are more abortions per capita in Russia than anywhere in Europe, but this probably belongs in a future video that will be called Why Russia Isn't Great.
Well, don't tell that to fucking...
Anyway, the point is that this chat...
I mean, he's sucking Putin's dick practically. He's, you know, again, I cannot for the life of me figure this out, but why, oh why, did Alex Jones have this guy on? Didn't he do any background research? Did he not look into this guy?
This is the kind of guy that he would normally know all about.
Exactly! For the love of God, man, why? Why is this a fucking thing? Why do I, the dashing rogue, have to go call this shit out? I have a life. I cannot be a hero. I cannot be the guy to go in and, you know, fuck with the Russians. I can't do that. All right? I have a life. I have a job. I have everything wonderful, okay? But, you know, more importantly, Matt, do you know anything about this Malofeev guy?
Well, Will hunts him, but he can take it because he's the dashing rogue we deserve. No, but this other guy, no, I'm not familiar with him.
Right. I'm going to have to do some more research into this guy because it'd be very interesting to find out just who is being funded by whom. Given, you know, and I'll just say it, never trust an activist who doesn't have a job. You do as like if you look at the activist's work history, if they go straight out of college into activism, they're usually bad deals. And I've talked to you before about this. I'm going to bash Millennial Woes for a bit. One of my biggest criticisms from him is that he is getting a bunch of money from people he doesn't know about. So he's not a free man. His lifestyle, he can't get a job. He can't find any place to get any meaningful employment. Can't go back to school because they'll kill him, essentially. The leftists, that is. And all the while, you have this guy Malofeev or Soros or any of these other groups who will just push in money, and they'll get them to push talking points. So one of the rules I'll put out here is anybody who doesn't have a good, who doesn't have their own business and who is a full-time activist, be skeptical of them. Go ahead.
Malofeev is with the money. Dugin is with the leadership and the politics on Catejon. Now, Malofeev, by the way, is also the president of the Saint Basil the Great Foundation, which is sanctioned by the Muscovite Patriarchate. And the Muscovite Patriarch is a former KGB agent. Now, isn't that lovely? This is the challenge, basically, in this video. I don't want to go too much on the tangent, but there are just too many things to explore when it comes to practical Duginism, and we could spend 5 hours just listing all the connections. For instance, here's another one. While Malofeev is presented to naive pro-lifers and soon-to-be useful idiots for Duginist subversion as a man of the church, Dugin has expressed explicit disdain for the church for its refusal to adopt the occult and Satanism, or for trying to adapt pre-Christian concepts. Also, while in 2002 the Russian Orthodox Church declared his views as heretical, most of those clergymen are either dead or have subsequently been expelled from the church, and now Dugin actually makes regular appearances at the church's TV station with Ilarion Alfeev, the second-in-command after Patriarch Kirill within the Russian Orthodox Church. I'm sure that's just a coincidence, and the church...
So, to put that in perspective, we have a Satanist in the high echelons of power, or a Crowleyist, or a person who hangs out with, who does like magic and the occult and shit, in the high levels of the fucking Orthodox Church in Russia. Does this sound like a freaking like a Tom Clancy novel, or does it sound more like a Dan Brown novel? I cannot make this shit up. I literally cannot make this shit up, and this is supposedly happening. We just showed clips of him being a fucking occultist. We showed clips of the people he hangs out with. We have evidence of this guy being, being naughty or being a liar. Like, what else do you need, people? Come on. I mean, do we deserve to be conquered if we can't get our shit in order? I mean, fuck.
That is inevitable if we don't.
Yeah, and that's why I think we need to unite. The enemy of my enemy is my fucking friend.
Except for the socialists, of course.
Well, they're not people, but
simply changed its mind so radically in just 10 years. And certainly it has nothing to do with Putin's regime intervening in the church in 2010 and 2011. And the sad part is that many of these connections are not known widely, not because they are a secret, but because exposing them would mean translating thousands upon thousands of pages and texts and documents from Russian, and also numerous hours of interviews. I mean, it took me months to do the research for this video, and all I had to do was to read and watch videos. And translating everything would take probably years just to get everything in English till present day. Anyway, to make this as short as possible, let's read a fragment of a recent article from Catejon in which Dugin provides some tactical advice on how to spread Duginism in Eastern Europe, a region in which he acknowledges that it is a lot harder to sell the love of Russia because, well, let's just say that having people around remembering seeing their relatives shred into pieces by Russian tanks tends to have an effect. Anyway, the article is without author, which is standard operating procedure when the admin, Dugin that is, posts something. So, geopolitics of Eastern Europe, some propositions for Heartland. Now, the article is very long, so I'll start from somewhere in the middle and skip multiple parts for time constraints reasons. Links are, of course, in the low bar. So, quote, NATO has demonstrated its presence in Eastern Europe and strengthened its military component. There are plans to place additional troops in Eastern Europe. In particular, this applies to Poland, Romania, and the Baltic countries. Since April of last year, a set of military exercises have been performed within the framework of the implementation of Operation Atlantic Resolve. The exercises won't finish for a year. They are taking place in Eastern Europe, primarily in the Baltic states, as well as in Romania and Poland, and also the partially affected Czech Republic. Maneuvers are also taking place in the Baltic and Black Seas. The objectives of these activities are, as a show of force, to demonstrate NATO's presence in the region, the strengthening of military technical cooperation between the alliance countries, and to improve the quality of interaction between the respective armed services of the Americans and their Western and Eastern European allies. The key countries here are the Baltic states, Poland, and Romania. It should be mentioned that in addition to military exercises in these countries, there was an increase in the amount of anti-Russian hysteria in the region, even including arrests and searches of those who dared to have an independent position on their country's foreign policies. The most remarkable were cases of Lithuanian nationalists who were blamed for publishing Alexander Dugin's texts on their website. The unusual and untimely death of Vlad Hodja, the young leader of the United Romania Party in December 2014, can be compared with the similarly strange death of Andrei Leper in August 2011, the leader of the right-wing populist party Self-Defense in Poland. These illustrate how being part of the opposition in Eastern Europe can cost you your life. Why is so much attention being paid to the Baltic states, Poland, and Romania? Firstly, there is a purely geographical reason. The Baltic states, Poland, the Ukraine, and Romania lock in Russia, separating it from Central Europe and especially Germany. With the participation of these countries, a cordon sanitaire stretching from the Baltic to the Black Sea can be built perfectly. To accomplish these countries are enough. Two of these countries, Poland and Romania, are the largest in the Eastern EU in area and population and have the most military potential in the region. The Polish population is 38,346,279 and its active personnel number 130,000. For Romania, these figures are 21,730,000 and 73,000. For comparison, the Hungarian army numbers only 29,000 and Serbia has only 20,000. Both countries, Romania and Poland, have their own military industry, and Poland has over 500,000 reserve troops. In both countries, society's elites and the common people alike traditionally perceive their countries as outposts of Europe and the Western world as a whole, and see themselves as defenders from Eastern enemies. Both countries have developed geopolitical concepts that justify eastwards expansionism. In Poland, this is a version of the old Jagiellonian idea, named after the dynasty that ruled during the Rzeczpospolita. The main ideas were formulated a century ago. There are the concepts of intermarium and Prometheism, as well as the ULB, the Ukraine, Lithuania, Belarus, or Gedaitis Moroshevsky. I'm skipping a bit. In Romania, they have their own Eastern pretensions. The country maintains claims to Moldova and Transnistria, and many support the anti-Russian concept of geopolitics of orthodoxy, which was elaborated by the Romanian geopolitical analyst Simeon Mehedinț, and based on the denial of Russia's role as leader of the Orthodox world. So for Romanian geopolitical tradition, it is crucial to insist on independent policy from Russia and the use of conservative Orthodox rhetoric against Russia. The third reason, neither of these countries were close friends of Russia or Germany, historically. This perception is based on the history of wars and submission and today's leading role of Germany in the EU. German and Austrian businesses have bought virtually all the lands, resources, and industry in Romania and Poland, so the rejection of Western hegemony and TNC in these countries is often reduced to banal Germanophobia. That factor is often used by Soros and his partners, who massively penetrate all protest movements against the destruction and theft of countries' natural resources. That hijacks the reorientation of these countries and the possibility of them entering into continentalist projects. Again, skipping a bit more. What is the political situation in Eastern Europe, particularly in these two key countries? Actually, the sphere of internal politics is dominated by Atlanticist structures. Continentalists are marginalized or divided and fragmented, and the formation of new structures has stopped. That was done with the United Romania project, for example.
He sounds like a total fucking leftist. Like, oh, we're being oppressed. Oh, we're being oppressed. Oh, God forbid we have to compete on a fair stage and we don't actually want to be controlled by you. Keep playing it.
The exceptions are Hungary, Greece, and Macedonia. The Dveri movement in Serbia has some political potential. The popularity of the Ataka party in Bulgaria is on the wane, and other anti-Atlanticist structures are marginal. Estonia and Latvia can both boast their pro-Russian parties. Center Party and Harmony are the biggest in these respective countries, but the pro-Atlanticist coalitions have relegated them to the opposition. An interesting example could be the creation of the Change Party in Poland. However, they remain marginal, and they have just started their political lives. What is more interesting is that the Atlanticists use conservative rhetoric both in Poland and Romania. This strategy was used for years in Poland and is today on the rise in Romania, where they created intellectual centers and political structures that merge conservative discourse with a clearly anti-continentalist geopolitical stance. The most spectacular example is the Romanian source LiniaDreapta.net, which is conducted by the heirs of former communist internationalists of Jewish origin. I'm sorry for this, but
Yeah, blame the Jews.
Well,
blame the Jews while you and your KGB friends try to fuck over the whole country, try to take over Europe. I mean, God, this is like a retarded version of Deus Ex. It really, honestly is. Go ahead, play it.
It's called consolidation. That's terror.
Yes.
Happen to know the guy who runs LiniaDreapta.net. Now, I don't always agree with him, and I wouldn't go as far as to say that I'm friends with him, but we do keep in touch since we have rather congruent interests most of the time. Now, Kostin, because that's the guy's name, is many things, but a communist internationalist Jew? I mean, come on. That's insane even by Duginist standards, and it's not like he's hiding or something. I mean, one of the many Duginists who crawl the internet could very easily look him up and see for themselves. Anyway, Let's read some more from this article because it really is a good article for those who want to understand practical Duginism. So, quote, the strategy, and here he refers to the strategy of criticizing Duginism from a conservative standpoint. So, the strategy can be clearly explained because conservative values are normal for 99% of Romania's population. The support of some parties that look leftist to Westerners is based on their clear support of conservative values, Smer in Slovakia and the Social Democratic Party in Romania, for example. Usually, the structures of the socially conservative, social populist ideological trend have the greatest support among movements and parties with a Euro-continentalist position. Appeals to traditional values and the sovereignty of states are finding their place in the hearts of Eastern Europeans. Skipping a bit, the region is home to the greatest number of people with positive attitudes towards the church in Europe, as well as the largest number of people who categorize themselves as religious. Eastern Europeans are least positive about the gender values promoted by the EU. This potential can be tapped, but must be used intelligently through the ideological models addressing the real problems that concern Eastern Europeans: loss of sovereignty, economic dependence and crisis, the sale of land and resources to foreigners, and the unstable future of the European Union. In the process of implementing quotas on migrants, the problem of third world immigration could emerge, especially when this problem, an influx of migrants, is coupled with an outflow of native people from these countries. So the ideological and geopolitical models that address the real problems of Eastern Europeans should be proposed by Eurasianists and not the nostalgic Stalinist-seeming left-wing agenda. In these models, historic memories that are specific to Eastern Europeans should be evoked. For example, their image of themselves as defender of Europe and Christianity should be reoriented towards defense from liberalism, cultural Marxism, the ideology of political correctness, oligarchic capitalism, plutocracy, and the forces of global hegemony. It should be stressed that the US leadership is now taking part in an anti-European agenda. Unfortunately, attitudes towards Russia, the key country in the Eurasian project, are not positive everywhere. Whereas in most of the Balkan countries, popular sentiments remain generally positive, the elite is anti-Russian or skeptical. In Poland and Romania, Russia is perceived with some anxiety, as many cling to memories of the country's troubled past. This is a problem that should be resolved. The continentalist leaders and structures in Eastern Europe should not look like the hand of Moscow. Moreover, they should not be the puppets of Moscow or Berlin. Moscow and Berlin, the trans-geographical continentalist poles, should find political forces, supposedly in the national populist camp, and think tanks that share a continentalist worldview and can be partners rather than clients. They should be oriented primarily towards their own sovereignty rather than Russophilia in and of itself. So the heartland, both European and Eurasian, must...
Heimbach, Matthew Heimbach. That's basically what he's saying. Heimbach, you got yourself your freaking grinder, Greg Johnson. You got yourself your, you got yourself the whole alt-right shtick. That's basically what they are. They're all working with Russia, in essence. They're playing to their tune, whether they know it or not. I personally think Heimbach is in on it because Heimbach doesn't have anything else to do with his fucking life. This is the best thing that happened to him. Honestly, keep playing.
Work in this direction. Now, are we clear? So, for this political project, deception is fair game. So is doublethink. So, for instance, it is a bad thing that Poles and Romanians remember the decades of Russian aggression because time is not objective, as Dugin explained in his book. But nevertheless, time is still relevant and suddenly objective if it can be used to forward the continentalist agenda, namely the Duginist agenda. Now, notice the consistency in blaming the United States. This is probably the only consistent aspect of practical Duginism. So Dugin explicitly says that for the purpose of the Polish-Romanian political project, the advocates of Duginism must do everything in their power to avoid looking like the hand of Moscow, even though they are and they will be. Also notice the willingness to be purposely confusing when Dugin says that, quote, their image of themselves as defender of Europe and Christianity should be reoriented towards defense from liberalism, cultural Marxism, the ideology of political correctness, oligarchic capitalism, plutocracy, and the forces of global hegemony. Now, this comes from a man who is funded by oligarchic capitalism, has a cultural Marxist view of sexuality, hangs around circles of plutocrats for most of the time, and aims to build Russian-centric global hegemony. I mean, you can't get more hypocritical than that, but... But then again, Dugin doesn't care if he is hypocritical. As he says in his book, it all depends on the current political project. In other words, hypocrisy is acceptable, or in a more traditional sense, the ends justify the means. He probably learned that as part of the National Bolshevik Party. But hey, at least he's willing to acknowledge several realities about Poland, Romania, and the Baltics. I mean, want to know...
What are your thoughts so far on that?
It's a new version, just all new version of communism. There's just with a Russian-centric version of communism.
Yep. And we have all these assholes marching on Charlottesville, marching in Berkeley, fighting in wars for an ideology that doesn't give a shit about them.
That'll always be funny, the fact that people mocked Mitt Romney for saying that Russia's our biggest opposition. Oh, if only they knew.
Yeah, exactly. What are your thoughts on this, Luke?
About the communism, the Russian central communism? What?
Yeah, about Dugin in general. What are your thoughts?
He's another socialist, and he deserves no sympathy or no compassion.
Yep. put him down. Gotta put him down like the animal he is. Keep playing.
What Dugin thinks it should be done about Ukrainians? By the way, here's Dugin in a Google Hangout.
Я думаю, убивать и убивать больше разговоров никаких не должно быть. Как профессор, я так считаю.
But just in case he might be misrepresented, Dugin made sure to clarify his outburst on Facebook. Here's Dugin on Facebook saying, quote, Ukraine needs to be cleansed of idiots. A genocide of cretins suggests itself. Cretins who are virulent, closed for the voice of Logos, deadly, and in addition to this, extremely stupid. I don't believe that these are Ukrainians. Ukrainians are fine Slavic people, but these are some race of bastards that emerged from the sewage.
Pause it. Oh, God. Closed from the voice of Logo. Closed from the voice. Okay. I mean, coming from a guy who, hangs out with Crowley and hangs out with a bunch of Satanists, that means nothing. Absolutely nothing. Again, rhetoric versus dialectic, ladies and gentlemen. This guy's is a sophist. He's not a philosopher. He's a fucking sophist.
A genocide suggests itself, and the cleansing of a country is needed. I mean, this is the guy who for a while was the official policy advisor at the Kremlin and still retains to this day a disproportionate amount of influence. Yet for some reason, I am the extremist whenever I mention the not so covert and the glaringly obvious danger of Russian aggression. Anyway, let's hop on Dugin's official website, 4pt.sovietunion, and read a bit from an article written by Andrei Tolstoy and Edward McCaffrey, Mind Games, Alexander Dugin, and Russia's War of Ideas. Now, before reading some of it, it is worth mentioning that Andrei Tolstoy, full name Andrei Tolstoy Miloslavsky, is a property developer in London who calls himself Count Tolstoy and hosts charity events like the War and Peace Ball, an event which just happens to be frequented by FSB agents. I mean, if Lev Tolstoy had been alive today, he'd be very unhappy, to say the least, of Andrei's activities. Meanwhile, Edward McCaffrey is a character of far less importance. He writes for the World Affairs Journal, a publication that is far less relevant than it pretends to be. Now, I know one-man blogs with more influence than that rag, but anyway, McCaffrey's bio on that publication says that he's a PhD candidate at Arizona State University, researching the influence of new media technologies on thought, culture, and politics. So yeah, now that we know who the authors are, let's read some of their words on Dugin's website, 4pt.sovietunion, quote, Alexander Dugin, the Russian philosopher and political activist, has attracted sporadic coverage in English-language publications over the past year. He is an engaging figure, prolific, radical, bearded, equally at home in university seminars, and posing with tanks in South Ossetia and Eastern Ukraine. So adept at self-promotion that he is sometimes not taken as seriously as he should be. Dugin is the intellectual who has Vladimir Putin's back in the emerging ideological conflict between Russia and the West. At home, Putin uses him to create a nationalist, anti-liberal voting bloc, whilst abroad, Dugin is the linchpin of numerous irregular networks of anti-liberal political resistance and sabotage. No individual better represents the tactics of the current Russian regime. Dugin's rise has been partly camouflaged by an intellectual biography that is complex and at times contradictory. An anti-communist in the 1980s, he worked closely with the remnants of the Communist Party after the fall of the Soviet Union. In the mid-1990s, he became involved with National Bolshevism, a group of political parties that openly espoused a combination of communist economics and radical Russian nationalism. He has praised Joseph Stalin and the Soviet Union whilst also supporting family and religious values. Since the late 1990s, Dugin has organized his views into a geostrategic ideology and the complex political metaphysics known respectively as Neo-Eurasianism and the Fourth Political Theory. The former posits an ongoing archetypal clash between land and maritime civilizations and holds that there is a struggle between, on the one hand, harmonious land-based societies organized around history and tradition, and on the other hand, inherently liberal Atlanticist empires of the sea whose capitalistic drives abhors and undermines tradition. Skipping a bit, Dugin's solution is for Eurasia to consciously become a Großraum, great space in German, and analogous in scope to the Atlanticist world. Within this Großraum, Dugin proposes a complex distribution of power between a strategic center and various subdivisions based on culture and history known as autonomies. This center is responsible for basic economic and military coordination between the autonomies, which are otherwise left to organize their internal affairs in accordance with their own unique traditions. Thus, there is a room for a range of different political, economic, and social systems, though it seems clear that Dugin imagines most will adopt a basically conservative and corporatist structure. Dugin's fourth political theory is based on the philosophy of Martin Heidegger, who argued that modernity is a kind of scientific objectification of the world which only accepts cultural or traditional knowledge as long as it remains secondary to any objective inquiry. According to Dugin, this paradigm is fundamental to three of the most powerful political philosophies of modernity: Marxism, fascism, and liberalism. As a self-professed Eurasianist, he rejects all three but believes that these ideologies still contain some useful elements, out of which he constructs their successor, the fourth political theory. This theory does not base its understanding of history on class, race, or the individual, but on Dasein, Heidegger's term for humanity. Dugin's goal is to cultivate a Eurasian socio-political network to rival its American-dominated Atlanticist counterpart. The nodes of this network are diverse and numerous, aimed at exploiting the shadow side of liberal institutions and technologies. One of them is the Russian system of higher education. Dugin is a professor in the sociology department of Russia's flagship Moscow State University, where the list of courses he offers, mainly on geopolitics, philosophy, and the history of science, far outnumbers that of any colleague. He has also founded the Center for Conservative Studies, which converts academics around the country to his agenda. Dugin also lectures at the country's interior ministry, i.e. the police, the academies, military schools, and other law enforcement institutions. These lectures are also available online, and in them he presents an Atlanticist versus Eurasianist perspective instructing Russia's guardians of public order about the nature of the liberal Atlanticist propaganda against which they must be immunized. A prolific writer who has authored dozens of monographs and hundreds of essays, Dugin tours the country and the world lecturing on political philosophy. His objective is to attract like-minded thinkers from the international fringe, involving them in debates and panels that imitate the mainstream discourse that shuns and excludes them. He has been an influence on the so-called New Right of Europe, including such parties as Germany's National Democratic Party, the British National Party, Greece's Golden Dawn, Hungary's Jobbik, and France's National Front.
That sounds familiar.
How so?
Just listening off all those people who are involved in nationalist movements.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the reason I've always been skeptical of these fucking national movements. Give me 1 second. Let me pull up a couple of other quotes. Oh, keep playing it, by the way. We're almost done.
Dugin's ideas are given added reach by a group called the Eurasia Youth Union, headquartered in Moscow, which broadcasts news and analysis via a website in Russian, English, Romanian, Serbian, and Ukrainian. The EYU has also supplied manpower for the separatist movement in Ukraine, its members fighting there under the banners of various Russophile armed groups. Dugin has also been actively involved in the politics of Russia's elite, serving as an advisor to State Duma chairman and key Putin ally Sergei Naishkin. His disciple Ivan Deminov serves on the ideology directorate of Putin's United Russia Party, whilst Mikhail Leontiev, allegedly Putin's favorite journalist, is a founding member of Dugin's own Eurasia Party. While claiming to be suspicious of the liberalizing effects of modern communication technology, Dugin utilizes it adroitly for his own objectives. Numerous websites that can be traced to him and his allies constantly cross-reference each other. For instance, 4pt.su, which is devoted to the fourth political theory, and Evrazia.org, which hosts neo-Eurasianist content, creating a sort of feedback loop in cyberspace that rivals mainstream news and social networks and serves as an aggregator for political outcasts. Despite Dugin's professed anti-racism, one of the consistent pathways to his area of the internet is through American white supremacist media. He doesn't denounce them because his tactics favor the empowerment of destabilizing agents everywhere, so long as their common enemy is the liberal order. With its ad hoc, often anti-intellectual worldview in which the manufactured fact is no less robust than the real one, the internet is the perfect medium for Duginism. In particular, he has exploited the mechanism of instantaneous publishing on the internet to retract or disassociate himself from controversial claims without harming their ability to propagate. In a notorious incident on his social network page, he posted the fabricated story of a Russian-speaking boy allegedly crucified in Ukraine by pro-Western militants and released a video in which he declared that the time had come to retaliate and kill, flashing his academic credentials. He added soberly, "I say this to you as a professor." After an outraged petition condemning the story and the statement was started on change.org, Moscow State University terminated Dugin's contract but almost immediately retracted its decision, blaming it on a clerical error. Dugin removed the story from his social network page, but by that point it had gone viral amongst Russia's pro-war groups and achieved status as a nationalist war cry. Now, Dugin thought that this is an interesting enough article to repost on his own website. In fact, 4pt.su hosts quite a lot of content that is either neutral or even mildly critical of Duginism. But there is a common bond between all those apparently contradictory articles. None of them are wrong from a Duginist standpoint. That is to say, whilst I, as a critic of Duginism, regard an article that details Dugin's tactics as a critical one, Dugin himself doesn't mind that as long as it is useful. And it is useful since Dugin himself has no problem in writing about his tactics, although he is a lot more cautious with what he allows to escape in English. That is how he attracted his fans, by avoiding the parts about Finlandization, the parts about the parts of Muscovite subversion, or other parts that would lower his chances of becoming popular, even amongst the very fringes of society. Because make no mistake, while it is true that Dugin is popular amongst the extremists of both the left and especially the right, there is still a struggle within these circles. So, for instance, whilst the National Policy Institute, which is an alt-right and white nationalist think tank from Arlington, Virginia, so while NPI fully endorses Dugin by publishing his books in English, by sponsoring his appearances at conferences, such as the 2014 European Identitarian Conference in Budapest, and so on and so forth, other similar organizations stay neutral or are outright hostile to Dugin. For instance, the American Renaissance, also an alt-right and white nationalist think tank, bounces between neutrality and hostility towards Dugin. For example, an article published by American Renaissance in August 2015 titled "Why I Am a Race Realist" contains the following paragraph, quote, When some people answer the question, how did you come to these beliefs, they may be tempted to wax philosophical, delve into metaphysics, or quote Houston Stewart Chamberlain. But tying white identity to opaque interpretations of René Guénon or Alexander Dugin is the right-wing version of liberals who insist on tying white identity to Republican warmongering. It overlooks basic truths in favor of academic theories, close quote. On the other hand, in 2014, AmRen did feature a Duginist at their conference, but the speaker didn't get into that at all. Now, the reason I'm mentioning all of these things is because sooner rather than later, those of us on the non-leftist spectrum will have to start being a lot more vigilant when it comes to subversion. And the task isn't easy, since the mainstream right has so far done a very, 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 very poor job at combating Duginism. I mean, heck, the most mainstream, if you can call it that way, takedown of Dugin was by a chap named Robert Zubin at the National Review. Now, I will leave the link in the low bar, but his coverage is absolutely hysterical. I mean, I'm not saying he's necessarily wrong, though calling Dugin a Nazi is wrong per se, since your average Nazi ideologue was less radical than Dugin. But I am saying that if that is the best the mainstream right can do about Dugin, and so far it kind of does seem that way, then the mainstream right really is the utter garbage that the alt-righters make it to be. On the other hand, the alt-righters need to be more consistent with themselves, and that's all it takes to reject Duginism. I mean, heck, a Google search for Duginism comes with the first result of a rather decent alt-right blog deconstructing Duginism and explaining why this ideology is not needed, regardless of one's goals within the alt-right. But for the rest of us, who are neither part of the mainstream right nor part of the white nationalist alt-right, but who are nonetheless opposed to the normative leftism of the contemporary West, we also need to get our act together. And so we get to the third and final part of this video, why it matters. Told you this is going to be long. So, there are a plethora of reasons for which combating Duginism matters for any thinking person, including, but not limited to, the fact that totalitarian ideological subversion is not and cannot be a good thing, regardless of who does it. However, we also do face another problem. Opposition to Duginism has also been picked up by the mainstream left, and as it always happens when a good idea is picked up by the left, they destroyed it. And the damage, whilst not irreparable, is indeed quite significant. For instance, the left, even the parts of the left who fully grasp the dangers of Duginism specifically, have entirely conflated Putin with Alexander Dugin and started casually throwing around terms like Putinism in so many instances where such a term was wholly inappropriate. More to the point, the anti-Duginist left unwittingly helped spread Duginism through their policies. Pegida in Germany, for instance, is a largely Duginist organization now. But would Pegida even exist without Angela Merkel's disastrous policies? The answer is a resounding no. At best, Pegida would struggle at the very fringes of the society, alongside with the NDP, which is the actual Nazi party in Germany, by the way, and that would be it. But Pegida has become a lot bigger than it should have become, precisely because Merkel insisted on proving them right on one point, namely that importing 1 million fighting-age Muslim men is a recipe for disaster. And instead of fixing that, the establishment left is complaining about the rise of nationalist and populist forces, and in Germany, they send the police in people's homes or the police to beat up Pegida protesters. That is not helping. That actually creates new Duginist activists who, again, don't really have to know they're spreading Duginism. In fact, I've already encountered a few decent, honest folks who are spreading around Duginist memes and who are genuinely surprised to learn that Dugin even exists. A few more years of such a disaster and a few more years of gradual...
I sent you some links on Skype. Show them. There's some Skype links.
Calculated deception funded by Russian oligarchs, including in the church, and we will have a huge problem on the right and in society in general. I mean, strictly on politics, we will end up in the situation where leftists are, where so many leftists propagate cultural Marxism without even knowing, because cultural Marxism has crept to the level of, well, come on, it's just what people believe. Same might indeed happen on the right with Duginism, and in many cases, it has already happened with certain issues. Now, I could be very rich if I had $1 for every individual who tried to explain to me what's really happening in Ukraine and then proceeded to serve me the Duginist view on Ukraine, which has virtually nothing to do with reality. I mean, heck, there are Lord-Libertarians, starting with the Lord-Libertarian-in-chief, that is Ron Paul, who genuinely believe that the Russian-backed tanks-on-the-street referendum in Crimea was actually a legitimate democratic act. And they're very staunch in their belief in this fiction. No amount of evidence, such as the fact that the referendum was deemed to be fair by a panel of formed exclusively by Duginists, no amount of evidence of this will convince them. Also, the people who believe Duginist narratives about Ukraine also tend to be the exact same people who know virtually nothing else about Ukraine, never have been to Ukraine, never spoken with an actual Ukrainian, and in many cases don't even know what language is being spoken in Ukraine, but they somehow know for a fact that Ukrainians are crucifying Russian-speaking children, or that the regime in Kiev is fascist. Now, another reason for why these things matter is purely economic. Under a Duginist world, we are all poor. It's just the way it is. There is no way you can have economic prosperity in Eurasia. And by that, I don't just mean the level of prosperity in a Duginist world would be, marginally smaller because of the setup's inherent socialism and the fact that Dugin is quite open about the fact that Russians would get a disproportionate amount of the prosperity, just like in the Soviet Union, as Dugin readily admits. I don't mean just that. I mean it quite literally. Under the setup envisioned by Dugin, the level of prosperity of whomever might have the misfortune of falling under it will be, at best, at a tenth of what it is now. For instance, Dugin thinks the Republic of Georgia should be part of Russia. Now, if that were to happen, Republic of Georgia will for sure lose a significant degree of its prosperity. Now, however poor you might think, or one might think of Georgia is right now, there is always a possibility to have it a lot worse. Now, some anti-Duginists, and indeed Dugin himself...
Thoughts, Matt?
Yeah. Sometimes the best response is just like what? What's going on? Huh?
Well, again, the blonde-haired, bearded gentleman, not Dugin, in the right-hand corner, is a member of Front National, not Lauren Southern. But we're going to get to the danger here. Now, if you notice the little Marty right in the middle of that picture. So again, these people are being influenced, whether they know it or not. They are being influenced by this guy. They're being, used as useful idiots. I mean, Martin doesn't have he doesn't have his shit together. Okay, the guy literally is a career politician. He's like Barack Obama or, God forbid, Bernie Sanders. He's an activist by trade. So yeah, this guy could be easily be purchased like a whore on the street. Anyhow, go ahead.
The whole thing as Russophobia versus Russophilia. Now, accepting such a paradigm is also in itself dangerous because it pushes Russia on a path to never recover. Again, Dugin is busy at home with fermenting more and more illiberal splinter movement, as if there aren't enough of those already. Now, Russia, as a civilization, as Dugin likes to say, has been cut off from the rest of the world in 1917 and hasn't recovered to this very day. The proliferation of Duginism is almost a guarantee that Russia will never recover. I mean, it's hard to imagine today, but in 1910, Russia was on par with Britain and Germany in terms of culture, civilizational development, and was generally part of the Western world. Now, sure, the rural areas were less developed, but then again, on such a vast landmass, it's not an easy task, especially with 1910's communications and technology, to distribute development. I mean, it's one thing to be Britain, an island, archipelago smaller than the tiniest oblast in Russia, and it's a whole other ballgame with Russia. But nevertheless, Russian culture was thriving and adding its own flavor to the Western culture. All of that was stopped in 1917, and the process was briefly resumed in early 2000s when Putin's grip on power was still weak, and the country had started to catch up with the rest of the world. But then Putin became stronger, and persecutions and old practices became normative again, and the recovering process was once again stopped. To put it in a blunt language, a brighter future for Russia cannot exist as long as the state is run using a Duginist template. And despite victimology claims to the contrary, nobody wants Russians or Russia as a whole to suffer. In fact, I happen to quite like certain things about Russia. I mean, heck, I speak their language, and I think many elements of their pre-communist culture are worth something culturally and civilizationally, so to speak. So it is in my best interest to have a Russia that is prosperous, that is proud of its traditions, that tries to make amends of its past through cultural exchanges and cooperation, rather than tanks and invasions, and generally a Russia that can be a good neighbor. Now, none of those are possible as long as the status quo exists. Now, one final reason for which combating Duginism matters is the necessity of avoiding the occurrence of another big war. Now, Dugin isn't shy about the fact that he wants an all-out war. I mean, he states that repeatedly in his book Foundations of Geopolitics and in many essays and articles. But then again, when he's doing activism and instructing the on-the-field narratives, he claims that it's the West that wants war with Russia. Nevertheless, the not-so-old but otherwise true proverb that whenever money and merchandise don't cross borders, soldiers will, still remains true. So it's a simple choice, really. Fight Duginism now in the war of ideas, or fight the tanks later in an actual war, or deal with the aftermath of an internal war. Because one not-so-tiny little secret is that Russia has quite a few big problems itself, and not just economical, but social and demographical. I mean, 20% of the Russian military is already Muslim. The life expectancy of ethnic Russian men is 64, mildly higher than war-torn banana republics in Africa. So their replacement with much more disciplined populations, such as Muslims from Uzbekistan or mixed-race Asians from Kazakhstan, is going to happen quite fast, unless Russia starts addressing these things. But none of these problems are of any concern for Dugin or for the Kremlin. Think about it this way. The only country in deeper problem than Sweden demographically is Russia. So the idea that a Russian-centric geopolitical order would be a good enough alternative to the US-centric post-Cold War order is simply a fantasy. But anyway, I'll leave those considerations for a future video. So yeah, this is basically Duginism, how it works in practice, and why it matters. So this concludes the longest and the hardest video I made since I started this channel.
Yeah. So now that we know that basically everybody on the alt-right, or at least all the main figures within the alt-right, and even some of the freaking people within Europe are basically dirty. They're all dirty. And various degrees of dirt, granted. Some of them are doing it out of necessity. Some of them are doing it out of they generally want this. Some of them, are being misled, and I'm just, it's sad because it works. Getting conservatots, getting these trad Catholics, these trad people to run around and say, "Oh, Russia's great." Oh, I'm like, well, have you ever been there? No. Do you want to go there? No. I don't know what to say, and that I've been trying to make this video for some time now. Thank you, Luke, for all your artistic endeavors. Do you have a PayPal I could send a link I can include in the description, guys? He did a really good job tonight.
Just doing what I can.
Oh my God. Oh, this was hard. And when you have people like fucking Lauren Southern and Pettibone running all around Europe, just people thirsting after the frickin' the ladies, thirsting after the ladies, thirsting after their these cute Aryan goddesses and shit. It only feeds this shit. Like, all it takes is some Instagram. All it takes is a little bit of money from Moscow to make it a trad tot into an Instagram thought. So.
Yep.
Final thoughts, Luke?
My thoughts can be encapsulated in the little image I'm sharing in the corner. Around the cross, civilization rises.
Absolutely.
And you have to actually enunciate the cross rather than the logos.
Yeah, again, going back to everything. This all is opened up when you have rhetoric, not dialectic. When you just start throwing a bunch of work hard, follow hard, and the money will follow. You must not disclose the logos. You must, again, what did you say to Beckloff prior? When Catholics love logos more than they love.
Well, I said that Catholics have invented a new way of distracting from Christ while simultaneously referencing him.
Yeah. Well, now you're going to have to use his name, Jesus. Because I'll tell you this. It's one thing to say logos. It's another thing to say or the black logos, or we need to have another logos. It's another thing for you to say we need another Jesus. We need a black Jesus, which, that sounds wrong for multiple reasons.
Having another Jesus is not biblical. It's anti-biblical. In fact, it's a new gospel.
It's Satanism, isn't it? It's satanic. It's evil. It's Antichrist. But yeah, thoughts, Matt? I know you've been kicking. You've been sticking with it like a trooper.
Yeah. Don't trust these people, and be careful where you get your information from.
My advice, my personal advice, is study the trivia method. The trivia method proposed by John Taylor Gatto, which is essentially input, processing, then output. And what that essentially means is you take in your information, you define your terms, and this is the thing that's going to kill Dugin in the end, and I'm metaphorically speaking, is if you get him to define his terms, he can't wiggle around. It's the equivalent of, he may be a giant and you may be a fish in the pond, but if you can hold him within the pond and hold his hand there, it immobilizes him. To hold him to a standard, hold him to terminology, hold him to get him to define his terms. And when he contradicts himself, use logic. So then you can see the logical inconsistencies, the fallacies he puts out. Like, again, he keeps making a false dichotomy between the East and the West. Like, he wants war. So that, of course, he's going to make a false dichotomy. Of course he wants to make the world black and white and there's no shades of gray. I mean, I've said that a lot of these people in the nationalist right are dirty, but that's not necessarily always true. Some of them are being manipulated. Some of them are giving in willfully, and some of them are just, grifters.
And actually, to bring back the original quote I had, he reminds me a lot of what one person said about a particular postmodern philosopher who was basically the inspiration for the Matrix movies.
I just opened myself up to more criticism than ever before on this channel. So be it. Simulacra and simulation was the philosophical equivalent of a placebo. You can toss it in the trash, there's nothing in it. And Baudrillard was a self-important pseudo-intellectual who had no point to make, had an undying love for hearing himself taught, and was criticized by his peers numerous times for indulging in willful obscurantism, refusing to qualify his claims, not defining his terms, and therefore writing unintelligible books. Hey, is this starting to remind anyone of anything?
That was funny, yeah.
That was well said, Luke. All right. I think we've gone long enough. Let's see how long this video stays up. I mean, I've said a lot of things, and I wonder if they will Streisand affect me or not. So yeah. Have a good night, folks. Have a good week. Go with God. Digital Renegades Podcast out.